Growing a food forest has changed my life, and I want it to change yours too, so I'm giving you two insane things. Number one, this is a video where it's a full installation training. We did a week-long training here at my farm a few weeks ago, and we filmed the entire thing of the installation, from the design process to the layout, species selection, ground prep, planting everything, all the steps for an installation in this video, everything you need. That's number one. Number two, the insane thing is I have a gift for you. It's a food forest demonstration site playbook. Basically, if you want to plant a food forest, whether it's for family production, just fruit year-round, whether it's for commercial production, community scale project, or whether you have an eco resort or some kind of retreat where you think it could benefit from having a food forest, which, you know, it's one of the coolest things you can do if you have land, this is the playbook you need. It's a 12-month blueprint, roadmap, all the frameworks you need, step-by-step checklists, all of it in here, even some design patterns. It's a free download. Click the link below while you watch this video and enjoy. Go plant your food forest. We ready to rock and roll, you guys? Cool. So we just walked through, just for context, the land is shaped more or less like this. You came in here, house, and then there's 3 blocks here. So we've just walked through blocks 1 and 2, walking this way to arrive at block 3, which is where the main installation will be happening this season. Every season, I have a different area that I'm focusing most of my attention on. And so, for example, most of my trials started at the back of block 1. Here in block 3, this was the remaining kiwi fruit that the previous owner had left. And it was becoming a pain in the ass to manage, right? It was just a lot of work, especially for tall people. The vines, we weren't getting enough money because kiwi fruit land we're in the middle of it. And even being organic certified, this whole farm is organic certified for 20 years, the price we were getting was still not worth all the effort and the labor that it was requiring. For that reason, I got the green light to basically cut it all down. We saved a few vines out the very back, which we'll integrate, mostly just for home use, but nothing commercial with the kiwi fruit, just enough to keep for ourselves. The idea is to create a more elegant system. A lot of the agroforestry that I've been planting over the last few years has been laboratory and laboratory extensions, right? Learning, chaos, and like just super diverse. And as I'm going forward, I'm refining things. I'm refining species selection, layout, and especially having gone to Europe this year, seeing beautiful systems, a lot of inspiration from that. This system is going to be focused on a few target crops. Some of them are going to be grafted trees, and some of them are going to be seedlings that we're going to be putting in. I'll explain that here. We can see there's 4 different lines. If I draw these out, 4 lines, can anybody guess the spacing between these lines that you guys see here? They're not consistent, but they're roughly 3.1 to 3.3. So there was a dilemma that I was working through over the last few days of kind of like dialing in the design. Do I plant the main crop in the main lines and then do a secondary tree line in the middle? The problem with that, I would have liked that for long term, more space for each crop, but the problem is that eliminate tractor access and I eliminate the ability to put the ducks in here, right? Because their coop slides perfectly between the 3-meter lines, which is great. As soon as I incorporate anything in between, no longer can I have the ducks in here. And I love the ducks. So that's why I opted not to put a middle line of trees here. We're gonna stack all of our target crops and all of our tree species in the lines. One of the things that I learned from, especially at Amadeco in Europe, have you guys seen the Amadeco video from Italy? Phenomenal. If you have the opportunity, the full video is on YouTube, but then there's like a deep dive in the fellowship in the classroom where we like dissect all the systems. And the thing that I was really most inspired by was they created this 12-meter module where in the middle they had 1 emergent tree, they would have 2 high strata trees, and then their medium strata trees below. And it was that on repeat over and over again with different species assortments. But it was really elegant the way it was done, because a lot of agroforestry systems that I see here in New Zealand, that I see in other places that are less thought out, are very chaotic. Mine are a perfect example of that. When we go see the oldest systems, it's chaos. There's not a real pattern of target species. It's just, yes, there's target crops coming up everywhere that eventually will dominate. There wasn't a lot of really thoughtful planning with the spacing of the target species. It was just, hey, I have a bunch of seedlings, I have a bunch of seeds, I'll just throw them in and they'll come up. In this system, I'm being a lot more deliberate because I'm planting a lot more grafted trees than I have done in the past, for a couple of reasons. One is I want to accelerate production of certain things, and I just want very specific varieties, and I want them fast. I could grow, for example, the pears from seed and field graft them. That's great. They're doing that in Germany. Me personally, I want pears next year and the year after that. And same with the citrus, the lemonades. I want lemonade production now. I want it yesterday. And so there's some things that I am going to be patient with. For example, the American pawpaw, Asimina triloba. If somebody Googles it on their phone, see the picture of it and you can pass it around. It's a North American native tree. It's a really delicious fruit, and it's cold. It's basically the cold temperate mango. Tastes like mango and banana for a cold climate. It's a deciduous, understory tree, and it's a phenomenal crop. It grows really well in the Waikato. There's a commercial grower. There's no one really doing it here in the Bay of Plenty at a commercial level. So I've got a bunch of them planted in blocks 1 and 2, and I want to have an even more deliberate system for them here in block 3. And so when we look at our version of this is going to be, the emergent layer at the top will be pears, Nashi pears, Asian pears. Love them. The round kind of brown ones. And they're an emergent strata tree, so they're going to be one of the taller canopy trees here. The high layer, next one down, is the Asimina American pawpaw, the North American one. That's a scientific name. Those are ones that I have from Seedlings, right? You can't buy grafted trees. No nursery is doing it. It's not common. So I have about 100 little seedlings in the air prune bed from last year. Now, how much can you buy an American pawpaw tree for from a nursery online? Anybody know? Yeah, maybe $35, $40. So I didn't spend anywhere near that to grow a bunch from seed. I contacted the grower in Waikato. I said, hey, can you send me a bag of seeds at the end of each season? So I put them in the air prune bed. I germinate them. The following year when they're dormant, I put them in the system. And so that's what I've done this year. Well, I did it last year to prepare for this year. And so I have about 100 Asimina, the American pawpaw, that eventually will be the high strata tree. Now, when you're thinking about the lifespan of these trees, in good conditions can live 70 to 100 years. Whereas, for example, a cherimoya or a sugar apple, custard apple, it's got a much shorter lifespan. Now that's one of the target crops of the other systems here, blocks 1 and 2, a lot of cherimoya. It's a delicious fruit, makes a nice ice cream. And so the American pawpaw, the Asimina, is one of the target focus crops for this system in the high strata. The medium strata are the citrus. Now, most people think, oh, you can't grow citrus in the medium strata. I mean, look at them here. They're in full sun. They're very productive. And there was a lot more disease pressure. As we've been pruning more, as we've been integrating the agroforestry, disease pressure has really dropped down, right? There used to be a lot of citrus borer into the citrus and kills them. A lot less of that in recent years since planting agroforestry and managing the trees better. But this is more or less how this will look. Now, this is all very diagrammatic. It looks very simple. In reality, it's not going to look perfectly like this, but the idea is that's the rough pattern for these systems. And so when we have these 4 lines that are 60 meters each, so if we number the lines in the way they're oriented here, this is line 1, 2, and 4. The Fijoa edge, which is where we spent about a week and a half doing a bunch of management pruning. I'll actually show you the Fijoas were growing to about here, where you can see these Fijoas that did not get pruned. And so the Fijoas were all they were dominating all the way over here, very stagnant. And there were actually, you guys see those pears right there? So those were actually planted already in this line. They haven't grown at all in the last 5 years. They were already here when we moved here, and they haven't grown one bit because of how stagnant things were from the Fijoas that had never been managed. Initially, the plan was not to remove them, but then when I realized I'd like to send the subsoiler through. The subsoiler, I'll show you later, it's an attachment for the tractor, and it rips a deep line, and that's what we've already done to prepare the soil. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not removed the pears. Now, the benefit also is I get to put the pears exactly where I want them. Rather than inheriting, well, they're just at 6 meter spacing, I can put them where I want them. Which, for this example, we're gonna actually be putting the pears at 11 meter spacing. I have the actual design on the computer where I have the actual spacing of everything, and it lays out, all right, where are we planting the citrus? Where are we planting the pears? Where are we planting all these things?
Well, will they be stagnated so that it's doing the opposite thing the other way?
That's a great question. Do you mean are the trees the same across the rows like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. Some of them are and some of them are not. I've been very thoughtful about which ones are in line and which ones are not. For example, the grapefruit, which are the tallest of the citrus, are going to be just offset from the rest of the citrus lines because in the middle of winter, when the citrus need their sun, the American pawpaw and the pears are going to be deciduous. So they'll let the sunlight in. But the grapefruit, being quite darker, taller canopies, actually want to offset them a little bit to give more light to the lemonade rows. These are the lemonade rows in the middle, 2 lines, grapefruit on the edge, and then the limequats, lemons, and limes. What else is important? We brought these poplar out. I've been waiting to put these poplar in. I wish I could have put them in a month ago when they were delivered. They've been sitting in water. They've started to sprout. I would have liked to put them in sooner, but we didn't finish preparing these lines until literally yesterday. And so they're the first ones that are gonna go in part because that will help us. When I'm approaching installation, I like to have a measuring stick in the ground. You understand what I mean? I like to be able to see, we know the poplars are every 9 meters, 8 meters, whatever it ends up being, and we can visually see that in the land as a measuring stick. All right, so we'll start with the poplars once we finish cultivating. We've already sent the ripper through. We have the little walk behind cultivator. The benefit is this. The transition from like the more equipment that I get, the easier this all becomes. When I first planted my very first system, I was ripping that up by hand. I had a spade and I was literally digging up like cubes, like bricks of compacted soil and like teasing it apart from the roots. And it took a week to prepare a 30-meter line. Then after a couple years, I upgraded. I got the little walk behind cultivator and I was like, oh, great, this is much easier. I could get through a lot more. Sending a cultivator through unprepared, like compacted grass, you know, it's still work, but it's a lot less work than manually doing things with a spade. Since getting the subsoiler and preparing the lines in advance, now the cultivating with the cultivator has become so much easier, because in the past, doing 4 60-meter lines with just the cultivator would have been a lot of work. Not that this isn't going to be work, but it's much easier work. And so as you get access to more equipment, it's going to allow you to do things at a bigger scale, and it's going to allow it to be easier and more efficient. There's going to be a ton of other things that are going in. I'm being non-discriminate, and so you might have seen the nursery area as we walked in here. There's a bunch of rosemary, lavender, sage, there's pine trees, there's bay leaf trees, there's pine nuts, there's juniper, tree lucerne, we've got Blackwood, casuarina, there's a ton of other trees. The reason I'm pointing this part out is this is the foundation, this is the bones, the skeleton of the system. Once we get these into their proper place, the other stuff, it doesn't really matter where it goes. Like, yes, it matters that it's evenly spaced, it's at a good density, but it's not so important of like, oh, which meter does it go at? Not so important. These are the things that matter in terms of placement. And then as we get more into planting the support species, then they can just kind of start filling gaps, right? Because they're temporary. They're only there for a short period of time. Whereas if I accidentally place things out of order or too close, I've got to live with that mistake for a long time, the lifespan of these productive trees. And so I want to situate things to make sure that I'm getting good sunlight distribution to the things that need it.
What's the pine tree for?
Great question. I don't see anybody using pine trees in agroforestry systems. I've seen one example of it, but it's a hated species. People don't like pine. They say it makes the soil acidic. It's terrible. I'm attracted to things that people say, it's a terrible tree. Yeah. Because they say the same thing about eucalyptus, they say the same thing about castor oil, poplar, all these things. It's terrible, it's not gonna let your fruit trees grow. Well, it's like, I have beautiful examples of the eucalypt planted right here, and the citrus planted right here, and the citrus is thriving, it's fruiting, it's beautiful. And so I keep pushing that because pines clearly grow very well in this area, and I have easy access to free pine trees. And so for me, if it's a weedy tree that's gonna grow fast, it's gonna put a lot of organic material, root exit in the soil, I can thin them out, I can leave certain ones if I wanna have a nice saw log, if it's in the right place, I'm gonna take advantage of that. There's this really great idea, I think it's from Ernst, that you want to plant indiscriminately, because nature plants indiscriminately. Nature doesn't say, but we don't like castor oil, we don't like tree lucerne, we don't like acacia, so we're not gonna. No, if it has a function in that ecology, it'll express itself. If it doesn't, it won't grow, and that's fine. But we plant indiscriminately to see and observe what the ecology is gonna allow for. And so, for example, we walked by a bunch of tree lucerne on the way out here. They're doing great. I also planted a bunch of the brush wattle. You guys might see that as a weedy tree in your area. It might do really well. One of the acacia. It does okay, but after maybe 3-4 years, it starts kind of die off here. In other places, it grows for 10 years beautifully. And so that's part of the diversity of experimentation. And because I haven't yet experimented much with pine in these systems, I'm excited to, because I know the tree grows well here, I have good access to it, I'm gonna be indiscriminate. I'm not gonna say, I don't want you because you have a bad reputation. Welcome. And again, that's just one of the support species we're gonna be using. The Blackwood, the acacia. So these are trees that are growing fast. I'm gonna be thinning them out. The eucalyptus, the poplar. These are all just trees that are gonna support the development of the soil, support the development of the ecology, builds a foundation that these will rest on top of. You might have seen there's probably 150 pines, roughly, give or take. We're gonna plant all of them. There's 2 different kinds, P-rad, radiata, and then there's another one that's a different variety that doesn't create wilding pines. It doesn't self-seed and go out into the ecosystem. We're gonna go very step by step, and it's not gonna be cool. See you later, guys, like, go plant it. First, we're gonna start with the poplar, getting the poplar in the right place. Cool. Once those are in, then we're gonna move to the citrus and placing the citrus. And once we've decided, cool, they're in the right places, then we can begin digging them in.
Which is killing the microorganisms and stuff. So we're only doing this right at the beginning to start, is it?
Yep. Just once, because otherwise what we could do is we could have just ripped the line and plant into this rip. The problem is that on these edges, there's still lots of established plants and grasses that will immediately take back in. What we could do is we could just let it decompact with the support trees. It'll take 15 years to break through any hard pan layer of compaction. And so we just want to do that mechanically because we can't ever do it again. Once you plant your trees, you can't go and then subsoil it. On the left-hand side, you can see a column with the target trees, how many of them I either have on site or have ordered or will be coming. The group totals, so for example, 28 citrus, 21 pears, 100 American pawpaw. I have a bunch of Japanese raisin seeds that I'll be putting in the air prune bed and then planting out next season here. We've got 3 almonds, 4 pine nuts, and a bunch of pecan seeds in the air prune beds that'll be planted in following years. Keep scrolling down, similar columns, support plants. We've got bay laurel, juniper, acacia blackwood, tree lucerne or the tagasaste, nitrogen fixers, casuarina, and then we have our different poplar varieties, which this is the kind of test for the different poplars that I'm trialing this year. I wish I had done this 5 years ago. I wish I had gone to a nursery and bought like a bunch of different varieties, see what performs well. I've been using Kawa poplar, which you can see on this list, Kawa. I'm using that poplar for the last 5 years. It's phenomenal. I love it. It's incredible. But I want to get more familiar with different varieties, right? And so that's why we're testing Pecom, Toa, Vero, Shinsei. I have Lombardy as well from a different area. Crack willow, basket willow coming, and Japanese fodder willow. We have elderberry, pineapple sage, and lavender. And so those are kind of categorized in a few different ways, either by species, right, with the edibles, or by species with the supports, or growth habit or management style, right? So they're kind of categorized in ways of, for example, the poplar, those are all gonna be pollarded, right? High pollards, emergent layer above everything else. So I group the poplars together. The willow, some of them might be coppicing willow, so cutting at the base, at the foot on a 1 or a 2 year cycle, and they resprout from there. Some of the willow might be pollarded at shoulder or above height. Part of what the consideration is when you're thinking about where do my support species go is how are you going to be managing them? For example, if I'm going to be coppicing things, right, cutting at ground level with the chainsaw every year or 2 years, I'm less likely to put them in the tree line. I'd be more inclined to put them on the edge, have a living edge with them. Coppicing makes it really easy to come through with a chainsaw. I do the same thing with the Mexican sunflower. I coppice it, I cut it at foot height once, twice a year, so I can just take the chainsaw and just run it along that edge and not be afraid that, oh, am I going to accidentally cut trees that I don't want to cut?
Fall on other things. So those are mainly for mulch?
Yeah, entirely for mulch. To say that, it simplifies it, right? To say it's entirely, well, it's mycorrhizal fungi associations that willow and poplar create, right? They're fungal bridge species, and so they connect multiple different kinds of fungi. There's arbuscular mycorrhizal and ectomycorrhizal. There's different kinds of fungi. There's saprophytic fungi, which decompose organic material, and then the mycorrhizal fungi, rhizal is roots. These fungi are the ones that have direct association with tree roots. So saprophytic fungi just decompose stuff. They don't have as much of an association with the tree roots directly, whereas mycorrhizal fungi have connections with tree roots. And so there's 2 different kinds of the mycorrhizal fungi. One of them arbuscular, the other one ectomycorrhizal and arbuscular mycorrhizal. Long story short, there's like running the highways, the ones that transport water, minerals, and nutrients distances, and then the other one makes a direct, like they actually connect inside of the tree root, the growing tips of the trees, where they make the actual exchange with the trees, sugars, waters, nutrients. So there's the exchanging mycorrhizal that connect with the trees, the long-running ones that do the transport. Long story short, the fungal bridge species, which are willow, poplar, alder is another one, aspen, birch. These are early successional species from temperate climates, and they're these fungal bridge species. And so I want to include as many of those as I can to enhance those mycorrhizal relationships.
Where did you get this information?
Yeah.
That's great, all over the place. It's like, this is, you know, I remember studying this in university, I've been reading papers about it, and it's kind of trying to connect a lot of information that isn't super consolidated, especially as it relates to agroforestry. And I've got a great YouTube video that breaks down just strictly on support species, the mechanisms, for example, the nitrogen fixers, the fungal bridge species, the CAM photosynthesizers, all these different categories of support species, and I kind of break them down, which species belong where, what functions, and how they contribute. I think it's called Oversimplified Guide to Support Species is the YouTube video. It's just on a whiteboard, it's explaining all this stuff. It's like 8 minutes long. That's how I'm categorizing things here, because a lot of that has to do with A, I want to know numbers to know how densely am I planting things, and B, the growth habit. I want to categorize things so I know where to plant. For example, we're not going to plant the elderberries and the coppicing willows in the tree line. We'll plant them on the edge. So it's starting to get an understanding of the anatomy, the layout of the actual lines. All right, we've got 10 of these new different poplar varieties of the Pecom, Toa, Vero, Shinsei, Kawa. I want to test by row. I don't want to just mix and match, you know, chaos, mix them all up. I want to be able to see and observe really clearly, all right, the Toa behave in this particular manner. They're paired with the citrus and the pears and everything else. And it's going to give me an accurate understanding of what do I like, what are the qualities and the characteristics of these trees, and also just be helpful to see, cool, this is how the line of Toa behaves. You know, if they don't behave, I can cut them out and replace them with one that's better, but I'm going to have them dedicated per line. So you can see we brought 4 bundles of the poplar out here. We've got 4 lines. And so you can see at the top is labeled Fijoas. To the north, these Fijoas here. And so this edge are the Fijoas, and then the next tab over, we've got the meter number. Starting at meter 1 on this side, we've got meter 1, 2, 3, all the way down to meter 60. The poplar in row 1, we're gonna do Picam, right? So row 1 starts by the Feijoas, row 2 will be Toa, Vero, and Shinsei, kind of working like that. And so one of the next steps will be, we'll get the Vero poplar and the Shinsei poplar, and we'll start to unbundle them at those rows, and then mark out, because they're in line, right? All the poplar are gonna be directly in line with each other across the rows at meter 1, and then meter 8, meter 16. And so that's the next step, is going down, finding the spot, the meter number that they're at, and that's where the poplar is gonna go. Well, just compacted, right? You can get it in, but after you send the ripper through, much easier. And at different areas, it'll be able to go in at different depths, because here's the problem. There was kiwi fruit in these lines. And so we were able to get the crowns out, which is great. It should prevent any re-sprouting. It might still happen, but it also means that there's roots in there, which when you're going through with the subsoiler, it would catch on some roots, and then you'd have to bring the subsoiler up over the root and put it back down. And so it's not a full, complete, deep rip as I would have liked, but it's as best we could get. And so you will find areas, for example here, there's still juices coming in from the kiwi roots. Now, it's not looking like this everywhere, but this was a particular spot that I noticed, pumping sap and sugars and water to where the crown was.
So did your subsoil get hooked on the roots, and then you physically, your tractor couldn't pull it through, or?
Yeah, first we took the Sawzall, which we have there, the reciprocating saw, and cut all the roots out to get the crown out. Once all the crowns are removed, then over the last couple days, we've come through and we've ripped these lines. And anywhere the tractor was really struggling, and you might see, for example here, where the wheels started to slip, if it wasn't able to pull through, we'd lift the subsoiler up, move it forward, and put it back in.
So those old root structures, will they try and start to grow again, or will they die out and then?
The hope is that they all just die and decompose.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that some will probably resprout because it's quite a vigorous plant. But again, I'll be able to manage that. And because they're all missing the crown, right? The crown of the plant is out. And so it's not gonna have long-term sustained energy. And so I will maybe keep having to manage some vines that come through, but the idea is not to have that.
If you had enough mulch, you would have probably mulched the whole tree lines, eh? Or no, is that something you do after?
Well, this is only mulch that came off these trees.
Yeah.
If I had unlimited mulch, then yeah, I'd be mulching really, really heavily. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna have a mix of cover crops and other like fast growing things, because I'm not gonna go and import a bunch of mulch. Too far, not good access here. So you guys can see one of the roots here from the kiwi fruit. As we're using the cultivator, this is stuff that you might find, and there's a couple stages of things that are happening right now. So basically, the cultivator is making this way easier since we got the subsoiler in. Right? Otherwise, it would be a huge, huge pain. It's actually a lot easier to cultivate after having subsoiled. The step after subsoiling and kind of during is, as we're finding roots, you might find roots that are still connected in the ground, and that's where the Sawzall will come in handy. You grab the root, grab the Sawzall. If you can rip it out, awesome, by hand. And so the step that's happening immediately after the cultivating, when you bring the cultivator through, it's kicking a lot of soil to the outside, right? You can see how there's these two mounds on the edge. We want to actually bring that soil back in because it's just covering up the grass and the existing vegetation. And so when you send the cultivator through, you want to bring the soil back in, and at the same time, we're taking whatever roots out. Now, that doesn't mean you have to like try and excavate this grass. That's fine, right? The 1/2 meter wide bed is plenty. We're going to plant some things on the edges and in the line. But as long as there's none of these roots buried in the middle of the tree line, that's what we're looking for. And it's pretty quick work, but it's a really important process. Because the subsoiler isn't this wide, it only created a trench about that narrow. When we're cultivating, we want to make sure that we're really doing a good job of straddling that rip line. Because, for example, the rip line is here. That's a lot nicer than there. And we have seedlings that are going to go in, and we just want it to be really easy for them to send their root down. And so what we don't want to do is have the cultivator positioned here. We want to be dead even on that rip line. I was being really careful. This neck, I'm trying to make sure that's always sitting just on that rip line. And it'll get really hard. It'll be a lot harder if it's not, because you'll notice, man, I'm cultivating like unbroken, more compacted ground. And so it's quite easy walking backwards. Now, if you've used a cultivator or a rotary hoe in a market garden, very different situation. Kaylee had experience like this, where you're cultivating soil that's already been cultivated for years or seasons. Right? It's already nice and fluffy. It's just really easy cruisy. This is not that. It's easier than if we were trying to cultivate this, but it's still gonna be traps, biceps. And what we're not doing is we're not walking this forward, we're pulling it back. I'm walking behind what I've just cultivated and I'm compacting it if I'm standing in the line, right? So if I'm letting this drag me forward, I'm just stepping and recompacting what I've just loosened up. The way this works is if you push these handles down, it pivots and comes up, right? So for example, if you start hitting roots, it starts getting really bumpy because you've hit an old kiwi fruit section. You can lift this up. You can let it kind of like pull itself forward a little bit. You can see what needs to happen. If you need to go deeper, which is kind of how you want it. You want it to grab as much of the soil as you can and kind of like really get a good cultivation. You're pulling up, and that's where the trap in the arms, right? And so it's a lot of this. And don't be afraid to go slow, right? There's no need, there's no race. You can just like let it do its work and then step back, step back. So this is interesting what you're saying. If you, for example, have an area of land that every season you're sending something like this or a cultivator or a larger tiller through, constantly doing this to the land, what's happening is the heavier particles in the soil are falling deeper and deeper. Every time you do that, the heavier soils are falling deeper and deeper. And because you're only cultivating to a certain depth, you're not cultivating like, you're cultivating maybe to here or to here. As that accumulation happens and it never goes deeper, you're accumulating a hard pan here. So it's not even necessarily like the compaction of like stamping and pressure as much as you're constantly cultivating here and all the harder stuff is settling here. And so you'll find just below where people have constantly been cultivating in wheat fields or cornfields, for example, there is that hard pan. And you might find yourself needing to untangle some stuff every now and then, depends on what vegetation you're hitting. It might be some roots, might be some grasses. And we're on a floodplain, right? The stream is just there. It's one of the largest floodplains in New Zealand. It's a confluence of 3 major rivers for the whole region, the Rangitaiki Plains. And so this all used to be a giant swamp. This was a natural stream, but there's plenty of channelized drains. This area would have been a swamp, floodplain. And so all the sediment and soil would have come from higher up in the catchment and constantly been deposited. Now that's not happening anymore because we're not getting those regular flooding events to bring that organic material, to bring the silt, the nutrients. The soil is very porous here. It is volcanic. And so if you dig deep enough, and we can dig a test hole later to see how that changes through the profile, different horizons, and you'll see we'll pick up pumice stones. And so it's very, very, very free draining soil. There's no clay content here. And so it doesn't hold on to moisture. It doesn't hold on to nutrients very well, which is the importance of adding organic material. Biology, fungi, those connections to mycorrhizal, that's what's gonna hold the nutrients and the water. Because at the moment, I mean, it's quite free draining. So, and if you find one of these roots, just yank it out. And so that's the line that we're gonna be aiming for. And part of the beauty of how we're gonna go through the order of operations, we're starting with the poplar. Now, why would we start with the poplar? In terms of planting order. Visual marking, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna make sure before we plant, I'm gonna show you, I have a big pry bar that's like this tall, 30 kilos. We drive a nice hole in, and before we drive that hole in, we're gonna find our little decompacting tool and make sure that we're dead on the deep rip for the poplar, so that then we can see, cool, poplar here, poplar there, middle, I know where to plant my things. Because if you plant things here, this isn't where the deep rip happened, nor is that. That's like that, you can feel that, I'm stopping there. It's pretty clear once you start following the right line with the cultivator, but that's the idea, is we're gonna cultivate, we're gonna find the spacing next for the poplar, and then get those in the ground. In the meantime, behind the cultivator, which looks like it's gonna happen here, is bringing the soil back in and pulling any of the grasses, any of the weedy roots out that we don't necessarily want in the tree lines. Stuff like this, just chuck it out into the grass. I've had mixed feelings about this, right? What's the downside if you don't do that? And it depends on what kind of things you do or don't want in your tree line. Like how fast do you want it to revegetate with what? And we're gonna be planting things quite dense. We're gonna put a lot of seeds in the ground. And there are some things that I leave. Some things like, for example, carrot weed, if I see it in the tree line, I think, that's nice, I'll just cut it. I don't need to yank it out. But if it's things like kikuyu especially, kikuyu, and thankfully there's not a ton of it in here because this was all kiwi fruit. And that's one of the benefits is every year the management of the kiwi fruit is you prune the vines, we would drop them down, and they'd get run over with the mulcher. And so this area actually had a really nice, richer soil compared to some of the other areas because every season it was getting a new deposit of regular mulch and prunings. Those are gonna be the next steps to cultivate and to kind of reshape these beds. So we'll take turns on this because, one person doing it all is no fun for everyone else. We want everyone to kind of get some experience and some hands-on. Don't burn yourself out. If you're like dying, somebody will be dying to take your spot. We put it where we want it and then giving it one nice clean. And this doesn't need to be like super, super detailed, perfect work. It just needs to be enough so that we're not getting like these clumps. And you wanna shake the soil off, that's one thing. Don't just like export the topsoil, right? Shake it off, don't shake it in people's eyes. If it jumps and it starts cultivating in here, just again, push the handles down, elevates it, flip it off. So we're just preparing to plant our poplars in the new agroforestry system in block 3. So these are gonna go in first. We'll start planting our grafted fruit trees between. We've prepared the lines, subsoiled, cultivated, removed the grass out of them, and now we're just planting the poplar every 9 meters or so, testing varieties. This is the Shinsei poplar. We've got Vero, Toa, just driving them right in the ground, making a little angled. Cool. So first, making sure we're kind of like in the middle on that rip line, because this is gonna be where we like understand the actual rip line is between all the trees and we're planting everything else. And so that's then where this would go, and whoever wants to start making a hole there, And also, I'll mention this now. Now is the time where we no longer want to walk in the bed. So we're standing on the edges, that's fine, but we're not walking in the middle. And don't be afraid to like really give it a... And so if we say that's a nice height, we'll say that's roughly the height that we want to try and get to. Maybe 700. Let's see how well that goes in there, if we need to widen it up at the base or if that's good. Who wants to take a guess at how long ago these were planted? 2 weeks. Yeah, Kaylee helped plant a lot of these. So same process. We have our railway spike, maybe 30 kilos, 25 kilos. That's gonna be how we're doing that. We drive it in, we bowl it out, we go deeper, bowl it out, go deeper until it's more or less there, if we can get it there. And then the trick here is we don't just wanna set the poplar in and walk away. It needs to pass the pull test, which is gonna be something that all these trees need to pass the pull test. All the plants that we put in need to pass the pull test. What's the pull test? I should be able to pull up on this and it's not gonna come out. It's not gonna wiggle, it's not gonna slip out. And so the way we do that is once we get it in, I'll use this as an example. Let's say this is our poplar. We've made the hole, it's sitting in there, we've kind of pushed. You wanna really like sink it in, put your body weight into it. Or from the top like this, and then it's gonna pass the pull test. That's just gonna make sure that it's nice and stable. It's not gonna be moving around. It's not gonna easily be blown out, nice, stable. They've been soaking in water for the last 3 weeks. And so they're full of water. The leaves are already coming out. They're ready to put roots in the ground. And they've got a lot of embodied energy. They're big, they're big poles. And so they'll use that initial energy to get their leaves out. And once the leaves are out, then they can start capturing sunlight and using that energy to put the roots in. So there's a few main things that I'm paying attention to when I'm planting. One of the most important ones we've already discussed, the pull test, right? Once it's done, you want to be able to give it a pull upwards and it needs to stay in. You don't want to just be able to yank it out. So sometimes I've seen people plant trees like this with the pot still on. Yeah. Let's take this out and have a look. Pretty root bound. Just give, if some of them are a little bit loose, the soil falls out, not as necessary, but if it's got a little bit of compacted, just breaking it up encourages the roots to kind of explore a little bit more. One of the other things that's really important is to bury it at the same level, right? So not up here where it's sitting a third of the way out of the ground and not so deep that you're burying it like this. Now, in some cases, some soil types, you might want to elevate your bed, right? We haven't done that here. In some cases, you might also want to make more of a concave shape. That's a little bit more preferable for here. For example, if we took the hoe and you can see this area already has a little bit of a concave, it's going to accumulate into the middle, right? Water, organic matter, etc. I'm not so fussy about that. It's not so important. All my other lines here have just been straight, and that's fine. But it's for drainage and accumulation of organic material. So the main thing is just kind of making sure that it's going in level, at the same level as the pot. And it's really, really important, especially for the citrus, for example, not to have the roots out and not burying it too deep. So that's one of the important things. This is ungrafted, so we'll take another example and look at a grafted one. But orientation of the graft, especially in windy situations, is also really important, not to put extra strain on the graft itself. You point and I'll do an example with the grafted one, but you point the direction of the graft into the wind, so when it's blowing, it's pushing the graft onto the tree, rather than the reverse. If the wind is blowing the graft off, not so ideal, right? Something that I sometimes will see people do is they'll wrap up and they'll just give it the old boot stamp. We're not gonna do that. The way you're gonna make sure that it passes the pull test is you're actually coming in from the edges, curing it like that. We're not pushing straight down. We're certainly not using our boot to just like stamp in and get all the oxygen out. Nowhere in nature is that how trees prefer to be planted. That should pass the pull test. Beautiful. It's in line. We made sure it's in that middle subsoil, the rip. It's level. We've done a nice job. This is really handy, having a knife with bagged trees, especially if the soil is quite loose, the roots haven't like fully developed yet. You don't cut all the way across the bottom. You cut most of the way across the bottom of the bag. That should be fine. And what you can then do is you place it in there. You make sure it's well positioned, it's at the right depth. We might actually be able to bring this one, see there's some roots there. We want to cover that up so that'll be nice. And then, I've done it well, you just pull the bag up and over, right? So no soil just falls everywhere. Look at this, this is a rootstock. You guys can see this right here? That's from the rootstock. I'm gonna peel that off right there. And that root's cracked. Can you guys see that? The root's cracked right there.
Ah, that's why it shot out at a shoot, eh?
Yeah. Make sure it's nice and straight, and then just bring our soil, then again in from the sides. It's flat. We're not compacting down, we're bringing it in. I'll do a quick demo for the red pears for those who are gonna wanna plant red pears, but if you're just gonna start off planting the grafted ones, go hard. You can come see the horizon. That's
clay now, isn't it?
Nope,
Just pure sand.
it's river
Wow.
sand.
Oh, river.
We'll give it a test. Yeah, I'd say that's great. That's just,
And then just sprinkle.
yeah. Now, in an ideal situation, what we're doing is we're separating the topsoil from the subsoil, right? And so you put the topsoil in one pile, subsoil in the other, and then you start back again with the subsoil, not inverting them as much. From what I've learned, it's best practice. For how much of a difference it makes, I don't really know. And so we'll kind of still come from, and that passes the pull test, it passes the wiggle test.
This is the wiggle test.
Yeah.
So I cut these off because these were some shoots that I thought were ready to grow. I could cut it here and let it form entirely new structure. It's gonna be easier for it to immediately start regrowing. And so from this, you know, I could prune this off here and let that start creating the new canopy. And so I'd rather keep whatever existing structures there are, but also getting rid of the mess of unpruned, stagnant. You can see all the lichen, like it's tangled up. The only ones we haven't done are the almonds, which are in those bags, but pretty much the same process as the citrus ones. Cut the base, fold the flap, yank it over. A lot of times when I see people having planted trees in their backyard, right, a peach tree, for example, or a nectarine or an almond that has this, you know, these stone fruit have this shape like this, like a cone. And when I see fruit trees that are really struggling in people's yards, it's because they plant it and then they walk away. And they expect it to just have a good form and fruit well and not be overcrowded. But there's not a lot of airflow that happens, especially for peaches and whatnot that want airflow. And so part of formative pruning is doing that as early as possible. And so sometimes, depending on the exact tree and what branches I'm wanting to keep, how high I want it to begin branching. This is an almond, it's gonna be like a high or emergent strata, it's gonna be above everything else. I want the branching to start a bit higher. Versus a citrus medium strata, I'm happy for the branching to happen down low. I'm gonna thin these branches out, and I'm gonna first just decide what are the stronger branches versus these weaker branches. I'll take all the weaker branches off, but if there's strong branches down low that kind of occupy a nice quadrant of like each quadrant of the tree, I could just cut it here. But unfortunately, there's only 2 of these strong branches and they're both on this side, they're kind of overlapping. And so we won't even worry about those. And these are all weak branches, kind of up to here. So I'll get rid of those as well. And then you can see the top is still really overcrowded, yeah? Like in here, it's tight, it's messy. And so off the bat, I'll just see, I'll take that, and then that's a weak one that's overlapping this possible branch. I could almost be comfortable with that. If this one was a bit, who knows, this one might develop better, but I'm looking to create the branching happening here and just start to open things up. And sometimes this happens way down low. And so I'll plant a tree in somebody's backyard, and then they'll watch me cut half their tree off, and they'll say, what did you just do? I just spent.
Yeah.
But actually it's better for the health of the tree, more airflow, better foundation. And so we might leave this in this format. And so I'll do that over all the almonds here.
And how long did you say for an almond to start fruiting?
A grafted one, 2 years from seed, it'll begin at 3. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's my experience with the peaches. Peach from seed in 3 years. Yeah, and we've got peaches and almonds from seed in that yellow bag that we'll plant out tomorrow. Over the last day and a half of the installation, we have planted, well, we've prepared the soil and we've planted all the target grafted trees. Now there are still target trees, target crops that have not yet been planted, but those are the ones that are gonna be from seedlings out of the air prune bed. And so the reason we've done it in this way, in this order, is because when you're planting in your lines, you want to plant things in sequence of largest disturbance to smallest disturbance. And what I mean by that is how big the hole is that you're digging. So for example, some of those big pears that we planted, big root balls, big hole. Now the problem if you start planting little seeds and little cuttings first, and then you go to plant the big stuff, you're disrupting the little seeds, or you're disrupting the little tiny cuttings. And so you always work from largest disturbance to smallest, which is why, for example, if we were planting bananas in this system, you have to dig a pretty big hole. You plant bananas as one of the first things alongside your grafted trees. What we're doing now is we have all the extra plant material, a lot of support trees, some other berries, the raspberries, some other potted plants. We have the juniper, larger pots. We're gonna work backwards in size, really just picking the next largest things. Those juniper are in pots, these raspberries, little hole for those. And then as we go, moving further and further towards little plugs of the support trees that came in little root trainers. And so we've already laid out the bones of the system. We've got our grafted citrus, our grafted pears, the poplar poles are in, the almonds, the bay trees, and the pine nuts. I think that's everything so far in terms of grafted trees and target trees. Next is a different kind of planting strategy, because these were all labeled by the meter, right, on that design. This meter is exactly this. Once we've filled that out, there is no more guideline or no more design in terms of what meter does something go at. We'll need to be calculating by how many do we have of certain things and what feels like the appropriate place to put them. And I know I just said a very feeling word of oh, what feels like the right place. Well, for example, you might notice that in some cases, there's only 2.5 meters between two fruit trees. But in some spaces, like here, for example, we've got this lemonade and then this pear, but there's probably a 4-meter gap between them. And so in the spaces where there's a larger gap between the fruit trees, that's where we might consider putting something like a raspberry, which we want to maintain sunlight for as long as possible on the raspberries. Yes, they'll fruit in partial shade, but for example, in a really dense evergreen system, they'll really start to decrease in production about year 3. And so if we can maintain their production for as long as possible, that's great. And one of the ways we can do that is placing them in a space where they're gonna get the longest term sunlight. And so in between these large gaps of existing fruit trees is where there will be the most sun for the longest. Because you can always just prune the support trees up to make sunlight for them. But for example, if we put a raspberry here right next to a citrus, year 3, the citrus will be here and starting to already shade the raspberry, whereas we can maintain production of the raspberries for longer by having them in the biggest gaps. And so we'll work backwards from the raspberries. I think there's 40 of those. And the way we'll go about this is just looking at, all right, how many raspberries do we have? How many juniper? How many of the acacia, the casuarina, the tree lucerne, all these other things? We'll take our total linear meters of all the lines, 230, divide that by how many plants we have of the raspberry. And that'll tell us how many meters, roughly, every meter that we're planting the raspberries at. For example, we have 200 tree lucerne. Now, if they all go in the system, I'm happy with that. I love planting them really densely. In the past, I've planted them every 1 meter, and it's been phenomenal. They create a nice canopy. They produce tons of organic material in the first year. In 12 months, when I come back in spring and do my next reset, they'll provide tons of organic matter to fully cover this space just with those. And that's what we're looking for, is things that are going to generate a lot of organic matter in the first.
So is that similar to the Mexican thingy that you were talking about, the one that comes out of the ground?
Similar in terms of how much organic material it's producing, but not similar in terms of growth habit and resistance to frost. The Mexican sunflower in winter, especially in the first season I plant it, it'll die back from frost. The second season and third season, then it has enough strength to stay. But the tree lucerne is super happy with the frost, and so that'll keep growing through winter, providing more canopy cover. And so for the tree lucerne, I'm really happy if we go all 200 of them in the system here. And they're also a cheap tree. They're like $2 each, compared to the benefit of having to move mulch out here, buy fertilizers, go through the effort of all, I'd rather just grow the organic material and prune aggressively. Tree lucerne are a nitrogen fixer. They're feeding the birds, they're creating a microclimate, reducing weed pressure, and they're just dropping leaf litter. Even as I'm not pruning, they're dropping leaf litter. So maybe we just go every meter with the tree lucerne, or just under, every 0.8, and planting these tree lucerne at that density. Similar with the casuarina, I think we have maybe 200 of those. Same thing. We have 80 of the acacia, and so we'll take 230, divide it by 80. That's roughly gonna be the spacing. And so when I say roughly, what I mean is, if you're going along and say, cool, I need to plant the next one at 1 meter 80, but there's a citrus tree right on 1 meter 80, you might wiggle it, right? You might give it 20 centimeters off. Yes, you can absolutely plant them right here. I've done that, but for those in particular, they're a little bit longer lived. The tree lucerne, I'm happy to cycle out sooner because A, there's so many of them, B, they grow faster, and they're just a shorter life cycle plant in the system. And so I'd rather not have a super long lived, for example, there's an area at the front I can show you when we're walking back out where there's a 4-year-old Blackwood right next to a blood orange. This is before I knew how fast the Blackwood grew. After 4 years, the Blackwood sitting right here on top of the blood orange is this big. Now, is it causing any problems? Not really. No, it's fine. I'm pruning it up. It's doing a thing. The blood orange is happy. It's fruiting. But it just makes me a little bit uncomfortable with the such a massive tree right here being directly on top. I'd rather just have it be 30 centimeters out. And so we'll be paying attention to how many of certain things we have, right? The tree lucerne, 200, great. Plant them every, whatever the meter number is, cycle them in really quickly. The acacia, we only have 80. They're longer lived in the system, and so we might give a little bit more breathing room to some of the target crops. Depending on the spacing, you can wiggle a little bit this way and that way. The casuarina, I'm not so sure. I haven't used casuarina in a system before. I've seen them used in systems that are 6 years old. They become a beautiful, tall, emergent tree. But again, I don't have a lot of experience planting it here. And so we've got either 80 or 200 of them. We'll see. Experimenting, learning. Similar with the pines. We've got a bunch of different pines. We've got these ones here. We've also got some in the root training trays that we still have to bring out from the nursery. We also still have the lavender and the rosemary, the lemon balm, all that stuff up in the nursery that'll still come out. But for now, we'll just focus on some of the larger trees. Same thing. I don't know exactly how many pines we have. Somebody can count and we can figure out a rough density. These are the juniper. We have 4. I'd like to keep these in for as long as possible. They're going to be a slightly slower, longer lived tree. And so again, we'll be thoughtful about, and maybe we'll place these ones out in particular before just planting them, but putting them in places where it seems to make sense, where there's a bit of a gap between things. These are the Blackwoods, little root trainers. If you haven't used these before, they're great. Snap open like that. And then look how healthy that root system is. White roots, ready as soon as you put it in the ground, gonna just start that growing journey. So these are very healthy trees. These come from tree and shrub propagation here in the North Island. They're about $2 a tree. They shipped overnight, they came next day. Right, I called her, I was on the phone with her on Wednesday. They came here Thursday midday. So very, very great. She gives I think it's a 10 or a 5% discount to all of the members. Just mention that you're in the Food Forest Fellowship and she'll give you a great discount because she loves you guys and she loves the work that we do here. So Helen is the owner. She's great. Thank you, Helen. And you can see the mature foliage starting to come, these wider leaves. There's 80 of them. And these are the casuarina, the ones that look kind of like horsetails. And again, I'm still learning these ones. It'll be an interesting experiment to see, but looking forward to seeing how they grow in these sites, respond to heavy pruning, and contribute to the system. So it's gonna get pretty dense in there pretty quick. At the moment, it looks like evenly spaced, more like there's a lot of open gaps. I don't like seeing open gaps. I like seeing just vegetation everywhere. And so that's the point of this, is once we establish our foundation, our bones, we're just gonna throw a bunch of stuff in to cover the soil, produce organic material, and get exudates in the ground happening. Next step would probably be finding a good home for these juniper. We can walk them out, place them in a nice looking gap. And again, I'm not sure how I'm gonna prune these. I know I'll prune them up and let them get big. I think they go up to 6 meters tall. And so maybe why don't we do this? Why don't we just stagger them like this across the middle 2 lines and see if we can find something like that works. So we've planted all of our grafted trees into the new agroforestry system. Now we're planting our really dense, diverse support species. We've got casuarina, we've got the Blackwood right here, tree lucerne, redwood, and pine tree. Now these are the support trees that are going in at a really high density. We have different numbers of each of these. We have 200 casuarina, 200 tree lucerne, 80 Blackwood, a bunch of redwoods, and a bunch of pine. Now the way you calculate the spacing is you take the total linear meters that you're planting. Right here, we've got 4 lines totaling to 230 linear meters. And you take 230 divided by however many trees you have of one particular species. So we have 200 casuarina, 230 linear meters divided by 200 casuarina equals about planting every 1.2 meters. And so we've already, basically the step is just taking the tree lucerne or whatever and planting it, walking it down the line along your tape measure here, popping those every 1.2. So we've already placed the tree lucerne every 1.2. We have the same number of casuarina, and so we'll plant those and we'll just put one directly in between each of the tree lucerne. So that's what we're doing. These are the main support species. We've also got poplar poles already in. Those are gonna be fast. They're already shoulder height, but these are the high density, and these are really cheap trees. They're like $2 each, and it's really inexpensive from forestry nurseries. If you want to go find some in New Zealand, go to Helen at Tree and Shrub Propagation. If you want the poplar, go to Matatoa, M-A-T-A-T-O-A. Really great poplar selection. Support trees, this is how we're doing it. And so one person, we're walking down the lines, placing the trees. The next step will be just poke a little hole. It doesn't even need to be like a big digging hole because it's already cultivated, it's already loosened. We've got the subsoil plowed already happening. So you can literally just take a deep stick, make a little hole, take the pot off or pull it out of the root trainer. You can see these roots are really, really nice and healthy, very happy, and just pop it in and then make sure it passes the pull test. Once it's planted, you want to be able to pull it, and if it comes out, it wasn't packed in well enough. Now you're not stamping down, you're pushing the soil in from the outsides. So those are our support species. I'm excited about the Castorina. I haven't actually planted any of it here before. See how it does, right? I've seen it do really well in similar conditions, and so we're gonna be experimenting it with it at a really high density, along with our beloved tree lucerne, Tagasaste, high density, 1.2 meters. We've got the Blackwoods at 3 meters. These are gonna be a slightly longer lived tree. We've got our pines, which I'm excited to trial. We haven't done a lot of pine planting here. I haven't really seen many agroforestry systems planting pine, and I wonder why, right? Similar things with the eucalyptus. People say, oh, it doesn't let anything grow below it. Well, the eucalyptus clearly does. I've got citrus planted super close. Eucalyptus feeding it, creating nice conditions. And so I'm excited to trial and test it with the pines as well. So that's our support species mix, and that's how we're planting them. So these are being planted every 4 meters down the line, these Blackwoods. There's a couple important things. One, to make sure is that everything is in line. So for example, even if a hole is a little bit out of line that I've done, just make sure everything is pretty much as in line as possible with itself. And I love this, right? That was the bay tree. This is nice, maybe it's a little bit high. And so we're still doing the same thing of making sure that the level of the tree in the pot is the same as the soil level. And so what I'm noticing is that there is some sections where it's a little bit hilly or undulating in the line. This is the moment that as we're planting these, we'll kind of just start to flatten everything out. That's gonna help us make sure, I'm gonna do all the pull testing on these, but we're making sure that this pass is kind of flattening the bed and making sure everything is in a super straight line, because this is gonna be how we know exactly where our seeds are going, right? We're making sure our seeds are gonna be going directly in between these. But those are the important things. It's straight in line, not wiggling, passes the pull test, and it's buried at the correct depth, and we're flattening the bed in this kind of same pass. And so if we all kind of come in this line first, I'll just make the hole and we'll make a chain, packing it in, making sure it's flat, and we'll just do each line at a time all together. Really, the system is focused on diverse, interesting citrus. So these two middle lines are entirely dedicated to lemonades. I love lemonades. I think they're gonna make a phenomenal ice cream. The outside line on this one is lime quats. So the lime that's fully edible with the skin and everything. There's some other limes and regular lemons in that line with the lime quats. And then this back line is grapefruit. So it's always gonna be across all the lines is citrus and pears, because they work really nicely together. The citrus need winter sun. That's when they're ripening their fruit, and so the pears are deciduous, they let that sunlight in. Same with the American pawpaw, the Asimina triloba. It's a really long-lived tree, can live 70 to even 100 years in good conditions. And so that'll kind of be the ultimate crop here. It's also just a really niche, quite rare. Those have not been planted yet. They'll be one of the last things that we do plant before we start putting seeds in the ground. And we're gonna be planting a lot more than is already here even. So once the beds were fully prepared, then we wanna plant the biggest things first. And I don't mean biggest by like what will eventually be the biggest tree, but planting the largest holes, right? The largest things we have to dig the biggest hole for. So for example, the grafted trees, we have to dig a big hole. And so we start with those, because if we started by planting small little seedlings and pushing seeds in the ground and then realize, oh, we wanna dig a big hole here, we'll plant a fruit tree, well, you're gonna probably lose some seeds deep down, you're gonna make a mess. And so it's always best practice to start with whatever biggest things you have and work backwards from there. And so you can see the size that we're at now, we're at these little plugs, some small pots to go, and progressively throughout the rest of the few days, we'll be working our way down to where we're just planting tiny little seeds. But the same principle applies when you're planting seeds, right? If you're gonna plant avocado seeds, you wanna plant your avocado seeds before you plant your radish seeds, because if you plant a bunch of radishes, and then you push an avocado in, you're gonna push the radish seeds way deeper than they'll be able to germinate. And so the entire operation for the whole duration of the install is always working from biggest disturbance to smallest. And so that was day one. After we prepared is planting the largest grafted trees and these poplar poles. These are buried about 1/2 meter deep. Make a big hole, you push the pole in, they'll have some nodes that are starting to swell and will turn into a nice tree very quickly. They're going to provide shade. They're going to provide a lot of organic material. They're also, we discussed this on the first day, they're a fungal bridge species. Long story short, like microbial activity and fungal activity in the soil is part of what creates a really healthy ecosystem, right? When you're spraying copper, for example, you're killing not just the bad fungi, but you're killing your good fungi. And so we would never spray copper here, but what we want to do is we want to enhance the mycorrhizal relationship. So mycorrhizal is kind of myco, which is like the fungi world, and rhizal is root. And so mycorrhizal fungi is different than saprophytic fungi. Saprophytic fungi consume living material that's dead and turn it into humus or soil. But mycorrhizal fungi creates connections with the with the fungi and the trees. The network, the internet of the soil that moves water, nutrients, and minerals between trees and helps trees grow. It extends how far trees are able to source water from. For example, if there's no water here, but there's water over there, the mycorrhizal fungi network will allow the transfer of that water to our trees. And so planting these fungal bridge species, which include poplar, which also include willow, these are early succession pioneer species that they grow quickly, they produce a lot of organic material, but they also have that fungal bridge activity, right? The connectivity between the fungi and the tree root. We've also got our nitrogen fixers in here, and so the nitrogen fixers are planted quite densely. We have tree lucerne planted about every 1.2 meters across the whole system. We then did the same thing for our casuarina, right? Casuarina, another fast-growing tree from Australia. We love our Australian trees. Same number, so we had 200, and so it was really easy to just plant a casuarina in between each of the tree lucerne.
How did you decide how many of them you need in the first place?
That's a great question. I called the nursery that I'm friends with, and I said, how many do you have? How many can I buy? And she said, we only have 200 of these, and so I just bought as many as I could. But this is actually a great density because in the past I've done tree lucerne at every meter, and it's a phenomenal density, right? They grow quickly, you can prune them aggressively, rather than having one here, one way down there, one way down there. There's not as much ecological function, right? You're not able to prune as much, you're not able to generate as much organic material. And so my preference for them is actually anywhere between 1 to 2 meters between the tree lucerne. It forces you to manage quickly, it forces you to transform that organic material into the soil. Otherwise, you're going to be precious. You're going to say, oh, but I only have 4 of them in this line. I don't want to over prune them. I don't want to kill one. Whereas in about 2 years, I'll probably have to start removing every other one, right? You can see me already doing this in some of the older systems with the eucalyptus. I planted them densely, and that forces me to say, oh, I have to make a decision now between which one of these do I keep. I'll cut this one. And even in an activity, it might seem useless. It's like, oh, why am I planting so many if I'm going to just, in 2 years, delete every other one? Well, that process of cutting it down and putting it on the soil, that's an improvement in the ecology. That's the actual purpose that we planted them for. And so you're forcing yourself to accelerate ecological succession by overplanting. And that's why we've gone so aggressive with our support species. That's why we've planted so many at such a density. We've also got acacia in here. These are Blackwoods. So these are slightly longer lived. They can be a nice timber. These are planted every 3 meters, so not quite so aggressively. I'll leave these in the system for longer. We'll see some examples of the more mature ones at 4 years old. They're about this big, diameter at breast height. And so they make a really nice pole, really nice microclimate, canopy, shade, just protecting things from either the cold winter or the really intense summer sun. Now, what you might notice about the soil here, you guys who've been here have been noticing this, we've got really free draining soil, right? I was about to say zero clay, but we found a little tiny patch of clay, but there's no clay in the soil. It's really, really free draining, very sandy. We're in the floodplain. Water retention it's really challenging for this soil. Super sandy, porous. It's got a lot of pumice and ash from Tarawera eruption just in our backyard over there. And so in the middle of summer, after a month of no rain, it's a really challenging soil to hold on to moisture. We're really drought prone. Versus clay soils hold on to moisture and nutrients a lot better. And so part of this strategy is creating more microclimate so that the summer sun is not so intense. The soil can be fully covered in summer and we're not losing that moisture. And adding organic material to the soil increases the fungal network, which is a big part of retaining water, right? Having life in the soil, fungi retains water. The whole purpose of the system, yes, there's a crop. Yes, we've planned and spaced the things out according to what strata and all that. But once we get past the foundation, kind of the bones of the system, we're just throwing a bunch of support species in to bring that ecology. These trees that people overlook and think are garbage trees, weedy pioneer species, fast growing, we don't like them. Well, we actually do like them because they're fast growing, because they can tolerate garbage soil conditions. All of these support trees tolerate really garbage soil conditions. The pines, the reason they were planted in Kangaroa, this whole Kangaroa forest, is because it was really really poor soil conditions. They couldn't graze, they couldn't do horticulture, they couldn't do orcharding. Well, what tree can we grow in really garbage soil? Pine, cool, let's plant huge pine plantations. We like them because they can tolerate poor conditions. Same with the tree lucerne, the casuarina, the acacia. Garbage soil conditions, they don't mind, they love it. And they're improving them as we go so that our citrus and our pears and our American pawpaw, the Asimina triloba, can have a really nice, healthy soil condition as they develop.
Yeah, how do you decide which ones to plant where you have?
Of the support species,
All of it.
all of it. So the bones of the system, the most important thing of like placement is about the target crops, the long-term stuff, and making sure that all fits nicely. And so really it's super simple because I mostly took commercial spacing for citrus. I widened it up a little bit. And so commercial spacing for citrus is anywhere, depending on the citrus, is like 4 to 5 meters maybe. And so we said, cool, 6 meters between our lemonades, because that'll give us close to commercial density, but a little bit of space in between for other things. And with the pears, which is the emergent canopy, we went with 11 meters because we want to still have a good density of them, but we want to allow enough sunlight to pass through for our citrus and other things. And so once you start laying these kind of like commercial density plus a little bit of wiggle room on the edges, it really is that simple in terms of commercial density of citrus is this, cool. Widen it up a little bit to make space for everything else, cool. What's commercial density for pears? Widen it up a little bit to make space for everything else. And then that's also giving us space for the American pawpaw, which those are in the air prune beds, which are where I'm growing the fruit trees from seed. So obviously I've purchased these citrus, I've purchased the pears. The American pawpaw you can't really purchase, especially from a grafted nursery. You can buy one seedling for like maybe $50 online. I contact a local grower, he sends me seeds every year, I put them in the air prune bed. So I've got 100 American pawpaw seedlings about this big. We're gonna spread them all out in between the existing grafted trees in the system. So eventually it'll be a citrus to the next pear or the next citrus. In this area, once all the support species go and they've been pruned out, it'll be a thicket of American pawpaw. Right? That's how they grow in the understory in these North American forests that they're from. They grow as a thicket. And so it'll be citrus, thicket of American pawpaw, citrus, pear above everything else, citrus, American pawpaw, and it'll be that. Asking about how do you plan the spacing? Well, I'm mostly looking at what are the most important species that are gonna be cropping here, the citrus and the pears, right? Those ones I need to be very planful of. And those are the main two that I was really just making sure that those were dialed in. The spacing on everything else is really just get a good density, get a good diversity, make sure that there's enough organic material being generated, and there's enough diversity in those support species. The pines, the casuarina, the acacia, the tree lucerne. This is the first system where I have not included eucalyptus, mostly as an experiment, but also because the nursery didn't have any just yet. The season's really slow for them. They haven't had enough sunlight, and so they didn't have any eucalyptus available. And so I said, cool, I'll just take the opportunity and maybe we just won't plant eucalyptus in the system and let the acacia, the casuarina, and the poplar see if they can perform that function, because in all the other systems I've got eucalyptus. And so we'll be managing eucalyptus, we'll be seeing eucalyptus in action in the other systems. This one, no eucalyptus.
Would you otherwise plant the eucalyptus like you would have planted the poplar?
Exactly.
So the poplar has kind of replaced your eucalyptus?
Yeah, but I would plant the eucalyptus closer together than I've planted the poplar. Poplar are pretty spaced at maybe 9 meters. I probably would plant eucalyptus closer to every 2 meters, more like the Blackwoods, which would leave it here and here. So the Blackwoods, and that's part of my thinking. I'm actually enjoying the Blackwoods a lot more than the eucalyptus, because the Blackwoods, they're growing faster for me in these conditions than the eucalyptus are, and the material sticks around longer on the soil. I'm noticing when I come back 12 months later, all the eucalyptus material is gone, unless it's like big rounds. But the Blackwood, even the smaller branches and the foliage, it's still covering the soil after 12 months. And it was a question, why would you want slow decomposition? Why do you want things to stick? Like, people have this idea that, but it sticks around forever, it doesn't decompose. And I love that. I want things, not that it doesn't decompose, everything decomposes, but I want it to decompose slowly to allow for as much cover on the soil for as long as possible. For example, if I have something that I let it grow and I prune it and I put it down and then it disappears in 6 months, well, that's not so useful for me, because then I'm gonna have to have more material to recover it and cover the soil. I want the soil to remain covered for as long as possible, and so when I'm looking for species that I prune them and the material stays on the ground and it takes a long time to decompose, I love that. And so for me, the Blackwood is a great analog for the eucalyptus because A, they're growing faster for us, B, they have a higher timber value, and the material sticks around longer. And so that's why I'm not super concerned about, I don't have eucalyptus in the system, but eucalyptus are so important in agroforestry. Yes, they're important, but what I'm finding here is I'm actually preferencing the Blackwoods for those reasons. Well, in other systems, I've got both. And that's how I'm making those observations. I'm noticing and seeing, hey, the Blackwood's like really dominating and the Eucalyptus is a little bit slower, and the Blackwood material sticks around longer than the Eucalypt material. And so in the systems where I have both, where I'm managing in the old system, that's where I'm making those observations from.
Yeah, but if you were to start new, you do one or the other, not both?
It's a good question, because if the lady at the nursery said, yeah, we have 100 Eucalypt, I would have said, yeah, great, throw them in. So it's like...
So do you think if you've got the option and you're not sure what's going on with your property,
Absolutely.
you do both
It's-
so you can see in a few years' time? What
Yeah.
it is?
I'm only comfortable with this because I have the observations of,
Already.
of the systems here. If I were just starting out on my land, I would absolutely be including both of them.
Right.
Yeah.
With all the plants, what's your rough cost?
That's a great question. I'm actually like tabulating that. I'm costing out all of it in terms of how much labor it was to remove all the kiwi fruit, to do all the pruning of the fijoas, to mulch everything, the installation side of it, how many hours. Rough cost for the plants alone, I think the poplar alone were 10, 20, 30, 40 trees at $10 each. So 400 for these poplar. So from tree and shrub, just under 2,000 for all the support species. And then I think it's probably a roughly similar number for all the grafted trees that I've put in. Now, I have not yet planted all of the grafted trees. You might find some labels where I was not yet able to source the lemonades, for example. So I will have like all the costs tabulated, and I'll make a big, kind of breakdown of all the costs once it's all said and done. But that's the rough cost for the support species. So far, I've probably spent that amount on the grafted trees as well. I think the citrus are 50. Yeah, the pears are like 60 something, sometimes 70. Almonds are 70. I think roughly $5,000 so far. So the subsoiler is 800. Rotary hoe is like 400 for mine. And some of these I propagated myself, not all of them. So for example, I did not these lavender.
Why do you have the lavender?
They're pretty. Yeah, it brings bees. And you can make a really nice oils out of it. It's going to add a lot of ecological function to the system, covers the soil, mulch, all that. And they're pretty.
The other systems that you propagate more of the support species, because most of these were all bought ones, right?
Correct.
So you could self-propagate a lot more to get down the cost.
Yep, and for example, the reason I've got tons of poplar here already. The reason I didn't propagate these myself is these are new varieties that I don't have here. And so I'm doing variety trials, which I wish I had done when I first started. That way I wouldn't have to buy these ones in year 5. I could have just bought fewer in year 1 and seen, cool, which ones do I like the growth habit of more? Because each line is a different poplar variety. And so I'm doing testing of that. Had I done that 5 years ago, I wouldn't have had to buy as many. I would already know which ones I like the most, because these are just branches, right? They have a poplar nursery, they pollard them, and the branches grow, they cut them and sell them for $10 each. If I had better time management or nursery skills, I would do all these tree lucerne myself from seed as well. But for $2 each, it's not worth my time.
Why are you planting everything in lines?
Easy management.
And the sun is going.
Well, so this is north, and so all these lines are the bane of my existence. They're running east-west. I would prefer things be north-south. Right, so in winter when sun is low, the back lines get shaded. And you'll see that same dynamic because the whole property runs east-west. And so if I could reconstruct this entire property, I would do one fat access down the middle or on the edges and shorter lines north-south. But because of the way it's already oriented, management, it would be too much of a cost to switch the whole property. But ideal case, I would be doing north-south lines. Because then sunlight is low in winter, it's still getting all the way to the back of the system. Yep, so in the middle, if you don't occupy this space, grass will grow until the canopy closes more. Once the canopy closes, the vegetation changes, and we'll see that in the older systems. There's no mowing, there's no brush cutting in the older systems because the vegetation is changed. And I've planted certain things. I've planted other ginger crops, I've planted other things. But in the first couple years when I'm not filling this space up, the easiest is just gonna be sending the tractor through. The idea eventually would be awesome to have no tractor access in here because I don't like bringing the tractor in. It's compacting the soil where if you think about the tractor wheels here and here, well, it's compacting where eventually the citrus roots and the pear roots will want to be. And so my preference is that minimal tractor usage is possible and for as short a time as possible. And so what it might look like is having 2 vegetable beds or 2 perennial vegetable beds or berry lines in between here. And I can very, very easily see that being the case where in the future, maybe I even put a trellis down the middle of these lines and I grow kiwi berries, right? Or I grow the gold kiwi fruit.
You put Mexican sunflower on the edges?
So I would, and I have Mexican sunflower propagated and ready. I'm still deliberating whether I put it in these systems or not. If I do, it would probably be on the south side. I've put them on the north side in previous systems, which we'll go see. For this system, I'm considering putting willow and elderberry, which is deciduous. It'll let the sunlight in through winter, but green up a lot during the growing season. Similar kind of response, right?
As a cover crop, the willow and elderberry.
The Mexican sunflower is not a cover crop. The Mexican sunflower is a perennial shrub. And so that's gonna grow the same way that a hazelnut would grow. A shrub, and you cut it back to the base, and then it regrows, you cut it back to the base, and it regrows. So that's gonna be the same as the willow. We'll plant willow right here on the edges, and every year, maybe once, maybe twice a year, I'll cut it back to the ground, we'll put the willow material right here. Same with the elderberries, right? Elderberries, they'll grow as a big shrub, we'll cut it down, put that organic material here. Eventually it'll get not enough sunlight. When you cut it, eventually it'll run out of power and just decompose, turn into organic material, and it's out of the system.
Elderberries are really hard to get rid of.
Yes.
So don't you have to deal with the roots?
The roots are not a problem if you're constantly managing the tops, right? If you let it get really, really big, it's gonna be more problematic. The idea here would be to take the chainsaw or the brush cutter and just once, twice a year, cut it at the base. And eventually, I've got elderberries here that are kind of at the end of their legs, and the base just crumbles, it decomposes. It's great. So it's not something that's gonna last forever in the system. If I wanted it to, what I also could do if I didn't want to bring the tractor in here, I could plant elderberry in this middle section, double lines of it like this. And that'll occupy so I don't have to do as much grass management. I get a bigger crop of elderberries and more organic material. Or if I was less focused on biomass, if I feel like I have enough organic material generated from the line, I could plant the raspberries in the middle, get a crop out of that.
And how often are you doing a big managing cut? Is it once a year? Or?
The big one happens once in the beginning of the season, and maybe do a slightly less intense cut midway through the season, and then in autumn at the very end.
Is that viable to put in here anywhere?
Absolutely, absolutely. You could put that in these lines and it would love it. It would love those understory conditions.
That's how popular the strawberry ice cream
Yeah.
fresh is.
Well, especially here, right? Julian's Strawberry Farm ice cream, they kill it in summer. Blueberry Farm, they kill it in summer. Ice cream, like fruit ice cream is a huge thing here, which is why I know that this is gonna work, right? Especially the novelty of, hey, it's not just berries, it's food forest ice cream. It's these rare fruits that you've never even heard of. It's growing in a forest ecosystem. And so that's what we're doing. We're building a forest so that we can have amazing ice cream. And so if we lived in that kind of climate, you could very happily do 3 or 2 lines of pineapples in between here. For this, I'm thinking just more temperate system, more temperate species. Blueberries could work, raspberries, blackberries on a trellis, any of those, also really high value. So that's my filter. I pass everything through what's gonna make a nice ice cream. There will be also pecans and Japanese raisins going in here. So pecans, love them. Pecan pie, delicious. And Japanese raisins they're both emergent. So pecans emergent long-term, Japanese raisin emergent long-term. I'll show you guys some Japanese raisin trees when we're back in the old systems. It's a raisin tree from Japan. These fruit look, so if you look up on your phone, Japanese raisin fruit, it looks like if you took a microscope and looked at like the arms or the joints of an insect. It looks very funny. So it's Hovenia dulcis is the scientific name, and it tastes like a combination of raisins and pears. It's actually an illegal tree to grow in South Brazil. It's classified as a weedy species. They're growing all over the place, these big, tall, beautiful things that rain down these little funny fruits, and you actually eat them right off the stick. So you just kind of like break a stick off and you just like a monkey, just like eat it like that. Also, we've got the pepino here, which is a really nice like little melon that'll creep along the ground in the tree lines, covering the soil, the lemongrass, and the lavender. And so I can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 trays. Then you could just do 2 trays per line, which makes it easy. We've got 2 trays of the lemongrass. I think we have 50 lavender, and so really it's just dividing it so it's equally spaced between everything.
Is there any reason why we don't put them between the tree line and the edge shrub?
It's a good question, because that's where the organic material is going to go. If I'm going to plant my coppice species here, the ones that I'm going to take the chainsaw to, I want to be able to just run the chainsaw and almost just walk it across the line, or the brush cutter, and just cut it knowing I'm not going to cut anything super valuable. And there needs to be space to then put the organic material for it to decompose and then get shaded again, because I don't want to put the organic material out here in the sun. It's going to get oxidized, it's going to get cooked, dry out, not so useful. So I'm going to put organic material here behind the coppice stool, and anything that's underneath this would need to be something that can creep and crawl back over this and consume it, which the pepino will do. Pepino is a vining thing, and it'll just like crawl over organic material and bring it down and help decompose it. Mint would be one that I wouldn't mind smothering with organic material. It'll just come up through it. Whereas that wouldn't prefer to get smothered by organic material. And so in that case, I would be putting it here. You could do lavender on the edge, but it wouldn't be a coppice necessarily. A coppice is a tree that you're cutting or a shrub at ground level regularly. So that might be the willow, it could be something like hazelnuts, elderberry, Mexican sunflower. Those would be coppicing, and they would eventually create a stool that just regularly gets cut and the stool grows, but it just stays like a woody thing there. Whereas comfrey is a herbaceous plant that could still be an edge planting, but it's not woody. It's not, you're not coppicing comfrey. The edge is just the location on the line. Coppicing is a particular management of certain types of species. The things that I'm gonna have like regularly cutting down with a machete at ground level or a chainsaw, I don't wanna have to stick my chainsaw in the tree line. That makes me uncomfortable to like regularly stick a chainsaw in the tree line here and manage stuff like that, because I might cut a nice high value tree down. And so sometimes what I'll see, for example, in Italy, they do this really well, is they will actually put these on the edge. Now, I don't have enough of them. If I had planted, or if I had propagated these myself and had hundreds of them, I could put these every 30 centimeters on the edge like that. That would be beautiful. It'd be really productive. It'd be great. But I just don't have the volume. That's a lot more labor expensive. And so if I propagated these myself next year, I could then plant more on the edge. That could be great. And then I would manage this edge with a hedge trimmer, the sickle bar. All right, and that's what they're doing in Italy. They have these planted on the edge, and so they just walk down with a sickle bar mower and just trim them. Different than a coppice, but you're still managing the edge. You're removing any sunlight for the grass to come in, and it's a productive crop for biomass and for making essential oils and whatever else you want to do. But instead, these will be going in the tree lines.
Stuff is in the tree line, and how much shade you need for them, or how do you decide?
It's a great question. It doesn't matter so much if you're going to manage it. And so, for example, the area that we're managing last night and will continue today, the Mexican sunflower were planted right here on the edge. And how tall were some of those Mexican sunflower? Oh, some of them were maybe 3.5 meters. So they're quite tall. And the problem would be if I didn't manage them. If I left them and all season long they just got huge and gnarly, then the things underneath would slow down, they wouldn't get their needs met. But because I'm coming through multiple times, at least once a season, cutting it down, getting a flood of new sunlight, then it's okay. The problem is stagnant shade. All right, so it's not like, oh, there's too much shade at one time. It's, no, there's too much shade for an extended period of time. Whereas if you're creating dynamic shade, where there's shade, but you cut it down, then you get a new shade. You cut it down, you get a new shade. That's fine. So when people say, oh, citrus, they need full sun. Look how productive these ones are. They don't want to be in the understory. They're not a medium strata. You're right if you're only looking at it in a snapshot. If you're saying, this is what it must be like all the time. But it's not ever like that all the time. These are dynamic systems. And so at the moment, in the oldest system, we'll go see a bunch of new sunlight. The citrus is going to be very happy with that. And the new shade that develops, it'll be happy in the new shade. It'll appreciate it. But it wouldn't be appreciating it. It wouldn't be happy if we just let the shade be stagnant forever and stuck unmanaged. The unexpected beauty of this work is I was expecting like, I'll just be super into food forestry and it's just about that. And then you realize, oh wow, these are principles that apply not just to the forest dynamics, but to life process. That's why I connect so well with this. It's like, man, you see the same thing. Like it hurts to prune a tree, but it hurts even more to like let the dead wood rot and get to the inside of the tree. In terms of making the planting process easy, there's two tools. So this will be used along this front edge. This is one of the tools that we have. And in terms of keeping it consistent, if somebody else is doing this, I think just that edge where it does transition from existing vegetation to open soil. Now, what you'll find is that some of the soil got kicked over on top of the existing vegetation. And so a rough measure would probably just be, I want enough space to put organic material. And so I think whatever this measure is, so we'll call it 0.5 meter. That should be good to then put that in there. And so this is the planting tool. It's for the willows. So the elderberry can be done with this. Super easy. Oop. We'll start off making a hole every 2 meters, and that'll just be for river willow to start out with. Then the basket willow can come later. We might not need to go as deep for the basket willow, I don't know, but for now, we'll just focus on getting these ones in because we've just taken them out of the water. And then we'll want to fill in between those with more of the unrooted version. So we can put 2 of these between each of those. What'll probably be easiest is look at this tape, and then on the next round, next line, just kind of line them up. So we don't need to put the tape on every single line, but we'll just find our spots. We'll start here and then go on the front, half meter off. And so the key here is they need to pass the pull test. It shouldn't be able to just slide out. And that's the beauty of cutting the angle. A hammer can be nice to just, oh, is this yours? Yeah. Just volunteering somebody else's water bottle. No, I don't like that. But the angle cut and then really just kind of putting weight into it. And then once that's done, feel free to compact with your shoe from the outside, just not on the inside, because that's where the soil is kind of wanting to be nice and loose. And I know I'm saying the opposite of what I shared with you guys the other day about like not stamping with your boot on grafted fruit trees. Willows, that's okay. We'll give it some stability, and that's gonna pass the pull test very nicely. So then I would go 2 meters over. So I mostly use the greenhouse for propagation to speed things up. It's not that things won't work outside, but especially at this time of year when I'm wanting to plant things as early as I can in spring and I want things to be as developed as possible, it's really helpful to have a greenhouse to speed that up through the end of winter. This is bana grass we spoke about recently, or the Napier grass, same kind of thing. And it's kind of like a bamboo, right? It makes canes. You stick a cane in with one node in the soil and one node out, and you can see right there it'll begin shooting where it's going to start doing photosynthesis. And so these are ready, and you can tell because there's roots coming out of the bottom, right? So yesterday I was checking, are the mulberries ready that we planted in pots? No, because I looked in the bottom and the roots were not exiting the bottom of the pot. So that's when you know things are ready to be planted. And so for example, this is a tray, it's called a Hyco tray. Super common standard forestry tray. This is 150 cc's worth of soil. And the idea would be they're ready to plant as soon as the roots have kind of like occupied that amount of soil, and that's just a measurement. Sometimes you can find 250 cc's. My preference would be to have something closer to 200 to 250. Like 250 is great, but these are what I get for free. So there's the Hyco trays. I'm putting individual cuttings in there of, for example, the bana grass or the Mexican sunflower. And so you can see the roots are not yet coming. I mean, there's a few roots coming down from there, a little bit of there. I would wait on this because the roots are not yet coming out the bottom. But this is going to save you a bunch of money because if you go to any food forest nursery website in New Zealand, a plant for $10, like a root. So it just makes no sense. Don't do that. So these are the Hyco trays. I'll then show you what a stock pot is. This is a stock pot. Basically just take a pot, fill it with soil, and jam a bunch of cuttings in. That way you're not wasting space, you're being efficient. And once these are ready, which you can see they're not, no roots coming out the bottom, then we'll have 15 mulberries. And you can see they're already starting to put little fruit out. And so one might be fooled and thinking, but there's leaves, I can pull it out. And then you'll be sadly disappointed when you pull it out and there's no roots. So wait until you see roots coming out the bottom of your stock pots. These are great for cuttings of trees like figs, mulberries. You could do grapes like this. You can also do things like the Okinawa spinach. We saw that yesterday. It has the purple underside. You could do this with the lemon verbena, rosemary, pomegranates, bunch of different berries. You could do this with willow and poplar. If you don't have a lot of propagation material, for example, if I only had like one of those branches, I would be doing this because material is scarce. This is a way of using small material really effectively. If you have big poles, you don't need to bother. Here's an example of a stock pot with figs. Same thing, no roots, not ready, but figs. I also use the greenhouse to baby things that I know would hate me if I put them outside. So for example, we have a jackfruit here. This would hate me if I left it outside over winter. Some of them in the greenhouse didn't like it. So I will be planting these outside this year. I have very little hope for them, but as an experiment, it didn't cost me anything to bring them over here from Australia.
How do you bring seeds legally into New Zealand?
There's a list of about 30,000 plants. It's on MPI's website. It's called, it's the Biosecurity Index, and you search your plant up and see, is it approved, is it not approved? Then you put it in a clear plastic bag, common and scientific name, and this has got me in the past, you need to make sure there's nothing else in the bag. There's no mold, no organic material, no soil, no fungus, no insects. And so what I will commonly do is I'll put a little bit of ash from a wood fire into the bag. That'll kill any of the insects. Problem is, some seeds don't like being dried out. And so if you're traveling for a while, they'll start to go moldy. And so some things you need to collect right before you go. And so I put ash in to kill any insects, but you have to get all the flesh off of the seed. You can't even, for example, cacao. I brought like 100 cacao seeds from Ernst's farm in Brazil. you know, awesome opportunity. I spent like 2-3 hours like scrubbing with sand all the seeds to get all the flesh off, all the pulp, but it's really hard to get pulp off of cacao seeds. Didn't get all of it until they threw the whole bag. They took them all. And then at that point it would be considered not just a seed, it would be considered like, you know, a fruit product. So you got to be really careful. Some seeds, not so much of an issue, but some seeds have a tough time getting pulp off. So that's mostly what I use the greenhouse for, is speeding up propagation and babying things over winter. There's lychee, however you pronounce it. And again, things that I'm having to baby because I don't know how it'll handle being outside. But this is from a farm in Australia. Yeah, and you can see the seed right there.
Greenhouse though on a timer to stop
I do.
from
Yep.
growing out.
So it's 10 minutes once a day of a really, really fine mist.
No, one of the sprinklers.
And so the point is, it's a really fine mist. You don't want it to be a sprinkler because that's a lot heavier drops. Whereas this is like a super, super fine. Air prune beds, they're phenomenal. The reason it's called an air prune bed is because the roots of a tree seed, these are not for vegetables, but they're for tree seeds. This is a micro, like a miniature example, where it's got shade cloth and a chicken wire, like a hard mesh. That keeps the weight of the soil in with the mesh, and then the shade cloth keeps soil from just falling through. And so what happens is it's elevated on these little feet. This was before I started stacking them on these bricks, which I like a lot more, but it elevates it. And so what happens is when the roots, you plant the seeds, you fill it up with soil or potting mix, the roots go down and they get to this layer of air and they start to push through, and they don't like being in the air. And so they self-prune. Now, it's not a hard prune. They just say, oh, I can't grow there just right now. And so they do more lateral branching. And so what happens is you can fit hundreds of seeds in one of these beds and not have the issues of, I have a problem with neglecting things and abandoning things. And so when I abandon my air prune beds and my nursery setup, it's okay. I've found that I need things like a food forest that I can't abandon. I can abandon it for 6 months at a time. I come back and it's okay. I can abandon my nursery for 6 months at a time. I come back, it's okay. My trees are happy. They're not mad at me. That's why I like food forests instead of gardens, because you can't really abandon a garden. But you abandon your nursery, if it's in an air prune bed, you come back 6 months later, you got a bunch of trees ready to be planted. They're happy. They love you for it. And so these are filled up with seeds at the moment. I've got this mesh on top to keep rats and birds from kicking soil around, and then I will eventually just remove this once they begin to germinate. This one's not filled up at the moment. I've removed a bunch of things from here. Those are filled up with this season's seeds, and basically having an array of them allows you to just dedicate, cool, this whole air prune bed is for these seeds. This is for these. Whereas when I first began, I made one air prune bed, maybe the size of 2 of them, and I would just say, cool, this strip is for walnuts. This strip is for macadamias. This strip is for whatever things you can collect on the side of the road, in-season fruits that you're buying from the farmer's market or wherever you're getting your fruit. Neighbors, just collect seeds like crazy and plant them. Now, one thing I did really intelligently until the very last stage, as you can see, there's pieces of tape right here, is I would tape and say, cool, this strip is for these. So I would label, I would know what's gonna come up. I just didn't complete the last step of actually writing the thing down. So I went through all the effort of like planning it and making it really nice, putting the tape to label it, and I just never did. So in some cases, you just kind of got to get familiar with what things look like. I know these are the American pawpaw. You can actually see right here, these are the Asimina triloba. You can see right here, this is the seed of the American pawpaw. It kind of looks like a little cockroach, and you can squeeze it. Give that one the squeeze test. Yep. And so that one is maybe still viable, aside from the fact that part of it looks like it's been munched. Yep, empty or still firm. And so this one is filled up with, there's a seed, there's a sprout. So in here is white sapote, there's another sprout. And so the nice thing is that I hate pots, right? Pots, you'll see a bunch of pots in the nursery. I hate them because A, they don't hold a lot of soil mass, and so they dehydrate faster, so you have to water them. I can't neglect it, sad. 2, there's so much more sunlight that's gonna be hitting the surface of the pot, you have to weed it, right? Because weeds are gonna grow. So you have to weed pots and water them. Not so fun. Whereas with this, once the canopy closes, obviously there's some weed pressure here, but in a few short months, once all these sprout, they're gonna come up really dense and the canopy's gonna close fully. It's gonna be a forest of just white sapote. There's not enough sunlight for the weeds, so you don't have to do any weeding. So you don't have to water it, you don't have to weed it, you don't have to baby it, look after it. You really can just like set it and for the most part forget it. Maybe one round of weeding before the canopy closes, and then that's it. You can come back 1 year later, or if you make them deep enough, which is why I build these so deep, you can leave them for 2 years. Yep.
What's the next amount of time you should leave them?
That's a great question. I've got trees over there that we'll go look at in the older air prune beds. Those are they're 3 years in the bed, going to their 4th, which is like too long. They'll still grow. They still have trees in them that I'll be able to harvest and pull out. And I'm using treated timber because I want these to last a long time. Previously, I was using timber that was not treated and it just decomposes after 2-3 years. And so I'd rather just make the investment and just have them for at least 5, 10. And so these are a huge asset in terms of not having to spend 40, 80, 120, 160, so on and so on of trees, right? Same with the white sapote. You can buy a seedling for 30 bucks, or you can just collect a bunch of seeds, put them in. This one would have had probably close to 200. I've already harvested this, so in here is about 100. In this one, this is a bigger one, maybe closer to 250, maybe 300. These are the cherimoya, which you can see right there. The rain kind of like pushed some of the soil off, so I need to sprinkle some more soil on top. But yeah, you can go really high density with them. And there was a time in the past where I would like really carefully like place all the seeds a nice distance apart. And I'll do that for the big stuff like the white sapote. They're big seeds like this, and so it's easy enough to like place them in organized ways. But sometimes the seeds are small. The cherimoya, for example, I had a big pile of cherimoya. I just dumped them, I spread them roughly evenly, and then I just put soil over them.
And they're about this big when you know they're ready to plant.
Well, I could leave these in another year. That's the thing. I could take the biggest ones and I could leave the smaller ones to develop another year. That's one option as well. But this is just 1 year's growth. After 1 year, they're dormant, they're ready to be planted. Now, if I left these for another month and a half, they would all have leaves, and I then would not want to take them out. So if it's a deciduous plant, a deciduous tree where it's losing its leaves, I want to plant that when it's still dormant. If it's an evergreen, I'd rather wait until it's this time of year, springtime, to plant it and then give it the longest season to establish. So for example, the cherimoya, they're a semi-deciduous plant. They will lose the leaves, but only very briefly. This is that moment where they lose the leaves and then put them back on. So now is the time where I would take the cherimoya and plant them out. I don't have any air prune beds full of cherimoya at the moment. I've got these ones planted, so these will be ready next year. These are the ones from here that we'll be taking out, the American pawpaw. It's also important to have shade protection because, in summer it gets brutally hot. So that just helps them have those conditions where they do want to feel comfortable germinating, not getting super stressed out. And I'm not really watering these. It's such a massive soil, it's gonna hold on to moisture. This is potting mix from a local nursery that just gives me their scraps. They can only use potting mix once, they can't use it over and over again, just the rules that they have. And so they've got a mountain of it that they just let me come and back my truck up to. So it's good to have resources in the area. Reach out to local nurseries. I'd recommend it.
Could you just use compost?
That's a lot of compost to use for this, and the tree seeds have their own energy source. They don't really need super fertile soil. The first air prune bed that I made, we've got the stream here, and I just used river sand. It just needs to be free draining enough, but doesn't need to be super rich nutrient dense. Just
Sand could work?
I probably wouldn't do beach sand. It probably wouldn't hold enough moisture. That's part of it, is like the river sand is holding, like it was holding enough moisture. Topsoil, it'll hold enough moisture. Potting mix, compost, yes, but different material. Really, it's a matter of what do you have access to and what can you like just put together. Because there is quite a bit, once you start getting a few, it's a lot of material. I wouldn't recommend just going to Bunnings and buying bags of like.
No, there's access to the river.
Perfect. Yeah. Yep. Or you could do river sand, and then on top you could do topsoil from your land. And so we'll walk over here and I'll show you some of the older air prune beds, the ones that were not made with treated timber, the ones that are a bit older and just kind of on their last legs. Have them in some kind of bricks, elevated, just because pallets will rot and degrade. But this one is treated. This one is not. This is only a couple years old. That's not going to last for that much longer. These ones, same kind of thing. But you can see these are trees that have been left in for, this is going to be their 4th year, right? And they're not growing a whole lot anymore. Their their root has kind of reached the bottom. They're not going to keep getting bigger and bigger, but they're still quite healthy, right? They don't look like upset at me for not having planted them yet. And so I'll plant these probably this year, not in the system that we're managing at the moment. There's a little tamarillo, sneaky. These are the white sapote, all right? So the ones that I've planted over there. Big cannonball-sized, super creamy, custardy fruit. It's delicious. There's actually one right there.
Do you have any seeds for that?
In the air prune bed. Yeah. They were ripe in season maybe 3 months ago. That was an accidental plant. No, I mean, it'll get planted for sure, but it was an accidental seed that got planted with these other American pawpaw. So these are the ones that I was kind of mentioning before. I said I had 2 batches. Yeah, and so this is how and I hadn't completed the process this morning because I wanted to show you, but I basically, there's this square of them, and I've just got this shovel right here that I'll just take and I'll kind of just like pry out and then and I'll just bring this right in there. And so in an ideal world, I'm not actually exporting a bunch of the potting mix because I kind of just want to keep these having potting mix in them. But what then I would do here to get rid of a lot of the soil or the potting mix and pull the trees out, because really we're planting these bare rooted, right? We're not trying to plant them with a bunch of soil on them. And so then what I'll do is I'll take this over to the hose over there and I'll just spray this with water, and one by one I'll pull these out, and very, very gently. You don't want to damage the roots unnecessarily. Is I'll start just watering these and kind of gently pulling things out one by one, just like that, right? And so that's going to be perfect. That'll be really beautiful. And then as we're going down the line to plant them, then that's the only moment really they'll be out of the water. See, look at that. Very happy. American pawpaw. 3 years old, maybe 2. The things that I'm putting in the air prune beds are generally a little bit more special, things that I don't have a ton of access to, right? If you only have 20 seeds of a thing and you're like, man, I want all 20 of these to go really well, I'm less liable to put them into the field than I am to put them in the air prune beds and then take care of them and then put them in the field. Your priority always wants to be planting things in the line, even if it comes to herbaceous stuff and covering the ground, right? So for example, our pineapple sage right here, you can cut this at ground level and it'll resprout and it'll send a bunch more suckers, and it's great. It's a great ground cover herbaceous layer, smells fantastic to manage. You can also prune it higher, like with a hedge trimmer, not at ground level. When it comes to prioritizing where do I plant things, oh, should I plant it on the edge or should I plant it in the line? So far we've planted everything except for the willows in the main tree line. If you have limited plant material, right? If you don't have tons and tons and tons of plant material, you want to prioritize putting things directly in the line, because that's where your main focus of not having exposed soil, covering the ground, that's your main priority. You don't want to have a patchy tree line and then have edge planting, right? Because having a well-planted tree line will be your saving grace in summer when things get really dry. Having a cover in your tree line will protect you from either grass or weed invasion, and it'll keep your soil from being exposed and drying out. Looking at the lines here and seeing, yeah, we've got lots of trees, but we maybe don't have as many herbaceous shrubs, ground covers. I think we'll preference putting these in the line. So we have 80 of these. So it would be 230 total tree line. If we go 2 of these between every lavender, so lavender and then equal spacing, pineapple sage, and then the next lavender, 2 pineapple sages, every lavender. I think that'll be an okay density. And then when we get to the very back, we might run out, or if we do line by line, the last line we can just do from cuttings of these. Because these go from cuttings. You can just take a cutting, bang it in the ground. And so if we go line by line, that'll make it really easy to see where we actually run out, and then just need to fill in the rest with the raw cuttings. And so that'll be one of the next steps, is getting pineapple sage in, because that's one of the last things that's going in the tree line before we plant our American pawpaw, for example. And then planting the last of the willow, 30 of these per line. Between all the river willow is a basket willow. And look at that. You can see right there, we've got a bunch of nice little roots developed. And so those 2 things can happen simultaneously. We can be planting the pineapple sage and then in between the willow, getting these basket willow. So we've got our lines pretty much finished. Now we're just planting our species on the edge of the line, the coppicing species that we'll be using the chainsaw. And we don't want to use the chainsaw in the middle of the tree line so regularly, right? Because these are going to get coppiced, all these willow. Once, twice a year, we'll bring the chainsaw and just level them. And I'd rather not be doing that motion with a chainsaw in the tree line. You might cut things accidentally that you don't want to cut. And so on the edge, they'll provide shade, biomass, and we'll lay that organic material right here. And these will just keep giving us beautiful food for our soil. So this is a basket willow. We've got river willow going in. We'll be doing elderberries as well. On either side of the grafted trees, just give it a meter. And so for example, we've got a citrus right here, and then the next grafted tree is this citrus here. And so a meter in this way, a meter in this way, we would be peppering this area with the American pawpaw. And so we'll figure out the density. So far, knowing we have probably just over 100 seedlings of the American pawpaw, 230 meters of tree line. And so that math works out just super rough. About every meter for the American pawpaw in between the grafted trees. Same with the pear trees. And so whether it's a citrus or a pear, right? This is a pear line right here of pears. And so we would still give a meter breathing room off the pears. Beyond the citrus and the pears, about a meter out, every meter an American pawpaw. And so that can be happening simultaneously along with planting the rosemary, the lemon verbena sticks, and the rest of the pineapple sage sticks. I'll do a quick planting demo. Basically, you take one out, you see nice root system, 1 meter off of the grafted tree, lands us about here with our lavender in between the casarina, under the tree lucerne. That's great. And so what I'll do is in the tree line, I'll take my machete and I'll make sure that I'm not stabbing something that a tiny little plant, right? And then I'll come in with the machete, and this might seem like bad practice, right? Especially after yesterday talking about don't put the chainsaw in the soil, it's gonna make it dull. Yeah, soil's gonna make the machete dull, but it's very easy to sharpen that, it's okay. I'll just kind of pry the soil like this, and then basically you're doing a transfer. But I'll pry the soil to the side, and then as I'm putting the roots in, I'm pulling the machete out and I'm pushing the tree in. So it's pulling the machete out as you're putting the American pawpaw in. And you want the soil level to be the same as what it was in the air prune bed, right? Same with the grafted trees. We're not planting too high, we're not burying them and burying the stem up here. We're keeping it as level as we can. And so that one right there looks pretty level. And then I'll just bring the soil back in. Now, when we're planting grafted trees or any trees, we're not taking our heel and our boot and we're not stomping around to super compact it. Getting rid of all the oxygen, you're compacting things. We don't want to do that. What you do want to do is you take your fingers, not the palms, but you take your fingers and you come in from the sides. And then you make sure it looks nice and it passes the pull test. So that's how you know it's good, it's in line, it's here, 1 meter off the tree, upright, that's good. Have you guys seen machete planting before? It's another way of doing things from cutting. So for example, when we do mulberry cuttings in here, you'll have a mulberry cutting, even if it's this long, possibly the pineapple sage or the lemon verbena or the mulberries that we do later, you take your cutting, pry it, you push it in, and then the same thing, you exchange them. As you're pulling the machete out, you're pushing this in a little bit further, and there you go. And if you want to take the top and make another cutting, right, it's best to have most of the material underground. You take your secateurs, which are invisible at the moment, and then you cut it here, and then you have a new cutting, and then you take that one over, right? So if we were doing willow like that, you have a big long pole, push it in, you cut it just above, you take the pole, push it in, cut it. So that's planting with a machete. It's quite easy, straightforward way of not compacting the soil. You're not inverting layers, right? That's one of the problems that I don't love about the drill, is it's mixing the soil horizons. Ideally, you're doing as little disturbance to the soil as possible, which is why the machete is so great. And so just being, some of these root systems are a little bit funnier than others, but again, we're always aiming to get the soil level where it was in the air prune bed, right? And ideally, you can get the roots down flat, and so they're not like this, right? So just making an effort to make sure you can getting it this deep, and then you'll just take these and very simple process in the tree line, all the way in. So don't snap it, don't put so much pressure that it snaps. The closer to the soil level that you're pushing from, for example, if I'm pushing it in and I get some resistance and I'm pushing from up here, it's gonna snap. So I wanna always be pushing like from the soil level down. Like here it's not super decompacted, and so to get it in, it's just a bunch of little motions until it's really not gonna go much further. There. But we're gonna plant them in the tree line. We're not gonna plant them on the edge. So just in line with everything else. Well done over the last few days, you guys. This is incredible, and I keep saying it, but I wish you guys could have seen how far it's come in the last 3 weeks. When it started off as an overgrown, unmanaged kiwi fruit, there were wires hanging at this height. There was old posts, kiwi fruit being ripped out with a sawzall, and a bunch of effort preparing the lines, getting things planted, and now we're at one of the very last stages. And so there's really 3 main stages that are left. 2 of them involve planting seeds. The other one involves helping to mulch, cover things up, right? Because we don't really want to leave bare, open, exposed soil, whether it's because of the sun roasting it, cooking to life, drying things out, or whether it's because the cover crop seeds that we plant getting picked out by birds and drying out and not germinating properly. Obviously, the mulching wasn't done comprehensively, and what I mean by that is it was done in sections, just because wherever we were feeding the feed up branches, that's where it got mulched, and we moved down the line, and so there's not like a nice even pile of mulch everywhere. One of the downsides. You can begin cutting some of that bamboo down and throwing the bamboo through the chipper if we've got time for it this morning. Before we dive into the next steps, the practical details of planting the cover crops and all the tree seeds and kind of looking at what those are there any questions about what we've done so far here? about the thought process, design process, implementation, like any questions up to this point.
Edge planting.
For the
I think
edge
we have,
planting.
Like 50 centimeter between.
Yep.
Is that something you're looking at, or would you rather have it closer space?
So the edge planting, Lena, you're saying is 50 centimeters between edge planting, and I'm not even sure all of them are going to take. I'm more thinking the elderberries, some of the unrooted ones might be questionable. We'll see. Yesterday I went through and I did the pull test on seeing, is that in there or does it go further in? That one's great. This one here comes right out. That's one of the things we want to make sure we're doing, is just double checking everything, make sure it's all nice and packed in. If everything establishes well, that density is fine. Now what you could do is, for example, if you have a creeping ground cover plant, like lemon balm, for example, or mint, that could very happily get planted in between the main tree line and the edge line, or it could just get planted in the edge line here, because that's fine to get smothered in organic material. That might also end up in a more comprehensive living edge, so it's not just relying on trees and shrubs, but you've also got a herbaceous ground cover, right? I've seen lemon balm work really well for that. I've seen mint work really well for that. Our analog will be the pineapple sage-ish, which again, isn't planted super densely. Really, I'm relying a lot more on the tree canopies to begin creating shade, rather than a bunch of herbaceous stuff. I'm guessing these tree canopies with a tree lucerne every 1.2 meters, all the different trees, all the seeds we have, they're gonna create that canopy very quickly. 0.5 on the trees and the shrubs on the edge, super happy with.
Did pawpaws about a meter away from the citrus?
Yep.
I was wondering why, and also what is the minimum limit of like how close things can be in the main line? Because I see like 5 or 10 centimeters between some herbs. So I'm just curious.
So because things occupy different life cycle and different strata is why we can plant them so densely. For example, the citrus right next to an American pawpaw, different strata. American pawpaw is a high strata, citrus is a medium. And they occupy very different life cycles, right? Citrus typically in commercial settings, they're productive for like maybe 21, 22 years, and then they generally will get replaced. They're not 100-year-old trees. You just don't really see it. And so the American pawpaw will outlive the citrus. And so them being so close is fine. And eventually the citrus will just go and it'll be the American pawpaw, higher value fruit.
Would you, if you have the citrus and the pawpaw, would you allow the citrus branches to like surround the stem of the pawpaw once you limbed it up high enough? Or would you not want it to touch?
That's a great question. If they're planted really close together, does the citrus have a canopy and the pawpaw shoots up through the citrus? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Basically.
Fine.
Yeah, there's no problem with that. Yeah, there's plenty of other examples where there's a citrus and then there's another tree shooting straight up through the citrus canopy. So let's talk about seeds. So you can buy these from King's Seeds. Sometimes I just don't have the attention ahead of time and I just go and grab things at whatever store is local, Bunnings, Mitre 10, and get a mix of lupins, oats, and mustard. I've used those ones for the last like 4 or 5 years here. They work great as a cover crop. This is my magic box of seeds. And so if you come have a look, if you thought that identifying plants was hard, start identifying some seeds. What are all these floaty, dusty ones? Do we know? So I wouldn't plant any grasses in the tree line. Obviously there's lemongrass in the tree line, but I wouldn't plant any running grasses in the tree line. What have we got here? Do we see anything that looks familiar?
Cherimoya?
There's cherimoya, yep, correct.
Pumpkin? Or something?
Some kind of gourd or squash.
3 kinds of beans?
This is a loquat from last season.
Hazelnut?
Hazelnut, yep, correct. What about all this dusty stuff? Paulownia, the tree, the empress tree. What about these stripy guys? That's castor oil. This right here is pigeon pea. It's an analog for tree lucerne in slightly warmer climates. This is honey locust. It's a spiky nitrogen fixing tree. Honey locust. And I collect these off the side of the road, you guys. I just collect seeds off the side of the road and get them and put them in here. So this one right there, that would be Hovenia dulcis. That's the Japanese raisin tree. So those will turn into a very tall, long-lived fruit and beautiful timber tree. Again, this is the loquat. That's a huge loquat seed. The hazelnut, cherimoya, acacia, the brush wattle. A bunch of random things, to be honest. So here's a bunch of almonds. What we're gonna do is we're gonna plant all of these into the tree line, like directly in between all the trees. And the idea is to plant indiscriminately. Some people might see this and think, oh, it's not planful, it's too chaotic, it's just a bunch of different random species. But we plant indiscriminately because that's how nature plants. And if some of these don't want to germinate, that's fine. They won't all germinate, that's okay. But the ones that do, show us that there's opportunity ecologically for them there. And if there's an opportunity for something ecologically, it's going to help move the system forward, whether as root exudates, biomass photosynthesis, or just holding space. And so this mix is just like a really ancient, some really old seeds in here, some that were collected this season, and it's just a big leftover box of seeds that I just keep adding more stuff to. Again, I'm not super fussy about it. This is all gonna get planted in these lines, and whatever comes up, we will see and we'll be happy with.
Plant it like that, or are we gonna sort out the big ones and plant them first?
That's a great question. And so probably the best way will to be sort out like the biggest ones quite easily. That's why the almonds are separate, is because we want to plant biggest stuff down to smallest stuff, right? Biggest stuff first. And so grabbing the biggest stuff more like this, sifting through, and then the very last round will be the fine dusting towards the top. And the reason we do that is so that we're not burying really fine stuff really, really deep, or it's not going to be able to germinate. So that's going to be the tree line. These are just going to get mixed afterwards and put along the edges. Instead of planting those in the tree line here, we'll plant the edges of these beds right here, basically surrounding and on the inside of our edge planting. And that's just going to be a 1 year. These aren't perennial. These are just annuals, the lupins, the oats, and the mustard. Those are going to germinate very quickly and take the space so that grass doesn't feel welcome to come inside. Plus, it's going to give us 1, 2, maybe even 3 really nice cuts of nitrogen-rich organic material throughout the season. All right, so we're not going to just let them grow and grow and grow and get all seedy and weak and gross. We're going to let them grow. They might start to develop flowers and seeds. We'll cut them. We'll put that material down, feed the soil, get a bunch of mulch, and then they regenerate, they regrow. And then maybe in February, March, we get another cut, we do it again.
Is there a particular reason why you don't use comfrey on the edges, or just because you don't have it?
I've tried so much comfrey here, and it just doesn't grow the same way that I see it at other places. In summer, it just flattens out, it dehydrates, it needs more moisture than we can retain in the soil. But you're right, that would be a fantastic option if it did well here. Because then it would just take this space beautifully. It would become this really nice big, I've got comfrey envy, people who can just grow comfrey, and yeah, it's fantastic. Yep, absolutely. But here in these conditions, in summer, it just... So what else? We've got our tree line seeds, our cover crop seeds, spreading them across each, and then separating them from the biggest ones to the smallest ones, doing the smallest ones last. These cover crops, we'll mix them all together and do the same thing. I see so often, I say, yeah, don't spend it all at the front half of the line. And then people get halfway there to the end and they're like, I'm out of seeds. You can always go lighter and then revisit the area, right? You can always like do a little bit less than you think and then be like, oh, well, cool, I've got some extra. I can go back over and fill in to make it more dense. But you can never, like, if you finish your whole load here, you're not gonna pick it back up and put it out over there. Start lighter than you think so that you have extra, then you can go back. Same for these. I wouldn't want to get 2/3 down the tree line and be like, oh no, I don't have any more seeds. Start lighter, and then you can always go back and fill. Step 1 will be these almonds. I'm not super fussy, whatever spacing you want to put them at, right? Just don't put them directly underneath the other almond, and maybe not directly underneath a pear. But even with a citrus, that's super okay, because they're very, very different strata. This is gonna be way high up. The citrus will get the winter sun because it's deciduous. They'd cooperate fine. So don't mix the almonds with the other almonds and directly underneath the other pears. Other than that, and these are our biosecurity bags. Look at that, officially brought in. So these are the bags they give you to bring your seeds in. As much as you can collect, really. If I only had a mix of 3 species, I would put that in. If I have a mix of 20, I'll put that in. There's also some pretty gnarly species in here, right? Pretty weedy ones. Castor oil, there's tobacco, wild tobacco tree in here. Makes some people nervous. You know, I plant pretty aggressively the weedy species because I'm here to manage them. If I wasn't wanting to manage those species, I wouldn't include them. You can also plant a beautiful agroforestry system without doing this step. I want to be super clear. You do not need to do this. I'm doing it because I've seen the results and the benefits that it brings, but by all means, you could just go more towards the orchard planting and have like this. And this doesn't scream orchard to some of you guys, but to me, it's there's not the random, the wild complexity to it. We've gone and purchased all these trees. We know exactly what's gonna come up, where it's gonna go. There's no surprises. And to me, that's a little bit less exciting. And it's also ecologically less exciting. And so we're doing this to spice things up. We're doing this to get more diversity, to get more root exudates in the ground, to have more photosynthesis happening. You're bringing the ecological wildness to it. Like I said, by no means do you have to do this. I do this because I see the benefit. That being said, if I was doing a system that was hectares and hectares, I don't know if I would be doing this. I might be having it more looking like this. You know, at that scale, you want to have things very measured, duplicatable. You want to be able to delegate work. Whereas like when this is coming up, how do you delegate this? Pretty crazy. And so there will be some nice species in here. Some of the acacias are going to come up really nicely. The honey locust will be long-lived, beautiful trees. Same with the Japanese raisins. A lot of other stuff might just be temporary. We'll see what gifts it has to bring. I'll do a quick demo of how we're gonna actually go about planting. And so let's say you're going with a partner, right? We've each got maybe a bucket between us. I'll grab a little handful. Again, we're not gonna be like going absolutely wild and dumping all of it in the first third. So you grab a little handful, you grab a few seeds, and in between whatever two species we have here, there's a citrus and a casuarina. I'll just make a bit of a trench and I'll fill that in. Now notice I filled in with the biggest ones. I let the biggest seeds fall out of my hand first. And then I can kind of maybe start pressing those in. And then the lighter stuff goes in at the top. And then maybe I'll pull a little bit of soil over anything that's poking out. So I'm just covering everything up. So you make a little trench between two trees. Right here, it would be an even smaller amount. Make a little trench. Let the biggest stuff kind of roll in, start closing it up, and then the smallest stuff gets a little bit of a dusting and then covered up. And remember, you can go a little bit lighter. We can always come back over and put a few more things in, but try your best to estimate based on what you see and what you have. So the main purpose of the cover crop is to keep the grass out, like shade enough so the grass has a harder time coming in.
Yeah.
And you know, we've done a pretty good job of cultivating, so there's not a whole lot of like big clump of grass on the edges. Maybe there's some, but certainly not in the middle. So there's no real grass pressure in the middle so far, and we want to keep it that way for as long as possible. In the medium and long term, that'll be the willows and the elderberry, but in the short and medium term, that's going to be the cover crops. So we'll split these into 4 equal parts across our bucket. So 2 people, 1 on each side of the line on the same bucket. Essentially, you'll want to slightly open it a little bit and then a sprinkle, trying not to get it into the middle, and then just a little compress in, a little bit of soil back over. If there's a few pieces poking through, just doing your best to kind of get things in and in contact like that. The front half we're raking towards the edge of the bed to create that kind of shape, a little bit of a concave shape to allow the water, organic material to concentrate inwards. And then when we go back and cover it up, you can use whatever's on that side, press it down. We just planted all of our seeds, and really to make sure that everything doesn't become bird food, you can see them dancing around right now. We don't want them to dig up all of our cover crop, and so we're gonna cover it up and mulch with the bamboo. Easiest way is having bamboo 20 meters from your area. Hey, look at that, we've got a bunch of bamboo 20 meters from here. So I'm gonna be cutting it down because this is a running bamboo, it creeps, it moves this way. Every year you need to manage it and keep pushing it back. Now that we are making use of the resource, right? And so we'll use all these branches, all these nodes, and basically just dragging these out into here. And we might actually start by dragging them all the way down, and then with the machete is just basically just putting this exactly where we've been mulching everything else, on those edges like that. And so as much of this as we can put down, the better. There's no such thing as too much. The seeds are gonna germinate underneath. It's not like it's a really heavy material that they won't be able to go through. And 2 of us can be cutting bamboo. Some people can be running it down, and then others can be cutting it, whoever feels more confident doing what. But that's really the last step, is just getting a good coverage on the edges to protect from the intense sun We have no idea how damaging the physical force of a raindrop actually is. Every time a raindrop lands on open soil, it moves a lot of the soil out. We saw in the air prune bed, where there was no mulch, the raindrops that come, they carve the soil away from the seeds, exposing the seeds, and then the birds say, oh, hello, thank you very much. And so that's why this is so important, because the birds just watched us give them a lovely feast. And so, yeah, they'll have some, but let's save some for the actual cover crop. So this is the best way of doing that, given the resources that we have around. If I had a bunch of hay, we could just roll that out and put it on. That'd be great as well, but we've got a resource right here that needs to get managed anyways. So I'm cutting it at this height because it's the most ergonomic place to cut. Later, I'll go through with the chainsaw and level it at ground height. Yeah, it's fantastic mulch. I'll send it through the chipper. I'll use it like this. It's great.
Is there anything that we shouldn't put on our trees or mulch of any, like some places have trees that are acidic or the wrong stuff?
I don't really consider that kind of stuff. It's all organic material. It's all going to get decomposed by fungi, earthworms, everything. So yeah, I'm not super selective about, oh, I don't use, I'm not going to be chipping like, you know, tantalized wood, for example.
Yeah.
I also wouldn't take grass clippings, for example, from like lawn care places where you're applying pesticides, fungicides, fertilizers, chemicals. I wouldn't take grass clippings from that kind of situation. But that's more less about the plant material and more about the chemicals that are added on. Yeah. So, ready to manage some bamboo? Cool. Hey, thanks for watching to the end of the installation video training. Hopefully it was really helpful for you. The next one to watch is probably this one right here, the management training video. It's for how to manage your food forest even better. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you haven't downloaded the playbook yet, do that, click the link below. Otherwise, I'll see you in this management training video. You're awesome. Keep growing.